People have always thought that big ideas were impossible until we made them come true. Finding new ways to innovate, helping humanity prepare for the unpredictable on the planet we call home. We see from the perspective of stars. And push beyond to keep the world safe.
This channel is dedicated to the study, analysis, and unveiling of UFO legacy programs. Deep Sixth, Special Access, Unacknowledged Special Access, and Controlled Access programs that are recessed to the darkest corners of the United States Department of Defense and intelligence community, carved out of traditional oversight channels to accomplish the retrieval, storage, reverse engineering, and exploitation of vehicles and technologies of unknown origin. The structure of such programs is indeed hyper-complex, likely a tangled web more labyrinthine than a channel like this can ever fully untangle or even comprehend. Nevertheless, our goal here is to attempt to unravel the truth behind UFO legacy program operations. Whether it be analysis of defense industrial base contractors likely involved in quote-unquote exotic RDT&E, such as SAIC, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and Battelle Memorial Institute. Investigation into critical defense laboratories, centers, and major range and test facility bases, such as the Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane, the Edwards 412th Test Wing or Dugway Proving Ground. Studying creative classification systems likely utilized to shield UFO programs that were derived from the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement, such as special nuclear materials, trans-classified foreign nuclear information, and non-contract foreign intelligence information. Revealing program protection structures such as the Department of Energy's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, or the DARPA Security and Intelligence Directive, or SID. Unmasking alleged gatekeepers such as Sean Kirkpatrick, Glenn Gaffney, Doug Wolf, and Bobby Ray Inman, or myriad parallel pursuits. My goal is to attempt to form a clear picture of programs dedicated to the recovery, study, and derivation of the greatest secret kept from humanity. In my projects, I enjoy dedicating entire projects towards single institutions, contractors, laboratories, facilities, etc., to really form complete and supported hypotheses. I see the legacy program structure like a pyramid. The very top sits the head or heads of the entire UFO legacy program portfolio. Perhaps someone with extensive service in the executive branch, with prior history as a Secretary of Defense, for example, such as the late Dick Cheney. Below the ever-rare and ever-elusive head of the pyramid sits Department of Defense or Intelligence Community Legacy Program Agency administrators. Below the admins sit federally funded research and development centers such as the MITRE Corporation, RAND Corporation, Aerospace Corporation, and national lab FFRDCs such as Sandia, Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Oak Ridge. At the bottom of the pyramid sits our beloved makers of the tools of war, the defense prime contractors, including the names you can probably immediately guess. The mortar that binds this pyramid together, well, this would be the defense industrial base, whose authoritative channels are often bypassed to allow UFO legacy programs to harness any U.S. military or intelligence asset needed to accomplish these clandestine mission directives. And finally, the limestone casing meant to protect the pyramid from the elements and exposure. Well, these would be SAPs, CAPs, USAPs, carve-out contracts, program protection offices like the DARPA SID and DOE OICI, counterintelligence, Sean Kirkpatrick, etc. I spend the majority of my time on the bottom of the layers of this pyramid, aka prime contractors and FFRDCs, as well as the mortar and limestone casing, aka program protection and program infrastructure. I hardly take the time to complete entire deep dives into offices from the Department of Defense and intelligence communities that I wager operate as administrators to various legacy programs. However, I have discussed at length some of these institutions, and these include the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, or DS&T, the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, or NURO, Army Test and Evaluation Command, or ATEC, Department of Energy Intelligence, DOE OICI, the Edwards 412th Test Wing, and more. These agencies do not all serve the same purpose within such legacy programs. For example, the Edwards 412th Test Wing likely operates and tests derivative technologies, aka alien reproduction vehicles, whilst Army Test and Evaluation Command, with its CBRNE expertise on Dugway Proving Ground, likely studies concepts related to CBRNE principles on recovered UFOs and biologics, while agencies like the CIA DS&T and DARPA may take a more broad approach. So today, I want to analyze a support agency that I theorize is a critical component to UFO legacy programs. A legacy program administrator or manager that I believe has been critical to such programs since its very inception. An agency that I wager has a unique role in the upper echelons of UFO programs, leveraging satellite and space-based intelligence platforms to monitor craft of unknown origin and provide direct support to UFO crash retrieval groups through various intelligence collection platforms. An agency I believe would be one of the first institutions to leverage alien reproduction vehicles or derivative technologies for the ever-critical purpose of national security ISR, or intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Today, we focus on one of the U.S. Big Six intelligence agencies, an office that once housed whistleblower and American patriot and hero David Grusch, the National Reconnaissance Office. So, what roles does the NRO play in UFO recovery programs? Does the NRO leverage derivative technologies to gain asymmetrical ISR advantages in denied airspaces? And why can we seemingly identify myriad UFO legacy program gatekeepers with ties to the NRO, MITRE Corporation, CIA DS&T, and CIA Office of Global Access? And a quick disclaimer, this video will not seek to play it safe. Later in this project, I will name and explore 13 such alleged NRO UFO legacy program gatekeepers and members, as well as detail an alleged UFO crash retrieval rapid reaction team, spearheaded by the NRO stationed in the Nevada National Security Site. And with all that being said, let us finally dive in to the National Reconnaissance Office.
They are silent sentinels. They look and listen from the cold reaches of space. They capture signals and images critical to America's intelligence community, warfighters, and policymakers. They reveal threats to the homeland, provide battlefield situational awareness, support counter-narcotics, survey the damage from natural disasters, and much more. They are the satellites of the National Reconnaissance Office, America's eyes and ears in space.
The National Reconnaissance Office operates as America's eyes and ears in space. one of the US's Big Six intelligence agencies, alongside the CIA, DIA, NSA, NGA, and unacknowledged NURO, aka the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, which is a sister agency to the NRO. The mission of the NRO is to develop, acquire, launch, and operate the United States intelligence satellites and ground systems, collecting, processing, and supplying ISR, or intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance data that uniquely supports both the Department of Defense and intelligence community, with the NRO's director answering directly to both the Secretary of Defense and Director of National Intelligence. Today, the NRO provides satellite intelligence to myriad U.S. agencies, including signals intelligence, or SIGINT, imagery intelligence, or IMINT, measurement and signals intelligence, or MASINT, and electronic intelligence, or ELINT. The NRO is comprised of defense contractor personnel and a hybrid workforce, including personnel directly from the Air Force, Army, NGA, CIA, NSA, Navy, and Space Force. This workforce is split relatively evenly, with 31% being NRO DoD civilians, aka cadre, 34% being U.S. government civilians, and 35% being military. Indeed, a congressional effort to review the U.S. intelligence community post-Cold War produced a 1996 report titled, quote, "Preparing for the 21st Century, an appraisal of U.S. intelligence," end quote. This document states the NRO employs virtually no federal workforce, unlike other agencies within the intelligence community. Quote, "Its work is accomplished primarily by contractors in the private sector," end quote. The document additionally states, even though the NRO has virtually no federal workforce and much smaller personnel numbers compared to other IC agencies, the NRO has, quote, "the highest level of funding of any program in the community," end quote. The office is funded through the National Reconnaissance Program, or NRP, the same umbrella organization which houses the NRO sister agency, the NURO. The NRO and NRP leverage the most cutting-edge and advanced technologies known to man to provide tactical and strategic intelligence to the National Intelligence Program, NIP, and Military Intelligence Program, MIP. These ground and space-based reconnaissance collection systems are designed specifically to equip the U.S. with asymmetrical warfare advantages. The tip of the spear of NRO programs and tools are sequestered to the U.S. black budget, accessible only through the bigot list of special access, unacknowledged special access, or controlled access programs. I mean, what can I say here? Even the existence of the NRO was denied and classified for over 30 years. This agency largely entered the public zeitgeist with the whistleblower testimony of David Grusch, an American patriot and Air Force and intelligence officer who served diligently as a senior intelligence officer in the NRO and senior geospatial intelligence officer for the NGA. Prior to Grusch and subsequent FOIA documents from the Black Vault regarding an NRO AI program called SENTIENT that observed UFOs, which we will actually speak on soon, the NRO largely sat in the shadows of UFO legacy program discussion. This sort of anonymity is likely by design, as whilst the NRO was founded in 1961, the office was not officially declassified until 31 years later in 1992. And this was regardless of early 1974 newspaper stirrings discussing a clandestine space-based intelligence agency called the National Reconnaissance Office. But we are already full steam ahead here, analyzing the modern-day capabilities of one of the United States' most invaluable intelligence agencies. So let's step back and analyze how the NRO came to be and why such an office may be on the forefront of UFO legacy programs.
The race to space was a series of firsts, and we were there. We were the first to surveil our adversaries from the high ground of space, literally taking technology to new heights, watching our adversaries, guarding against the threat of nuclear war. and providing strategic advantage to our nation. We were the agency no one had heard of because we worked in total secrecy.
The NRO's founding was due to a direct need to consolidate reconnaissance activities between the U.S. Air Force and Central Intelligence Agency, thus demonstrating to this day why the NRO is a joint DoD and IC agency. The NRO can actually trace its heritage back to World War II, when the U.S. military utilized aircraft to collect imagery and signals intelligence, aka IMINT and SIGINT, to operate against the Axis powers. But after a national embarrassment in 1960 that saw the Soviet Union shoot down a U-2 spy plane, President Dwight D. Eisenhower called in his top science advisors and CIA Director Allen Dulles to establish the National Reconnaissance Office. Consolidating Air Force and CIA SIGINT and IMINT data acquisition offices under one central office, the NRO, allowed the U.S. new and innovative approaches to gather intelligence in denied airspaces, and allowed the U.S. to immediately answer the American U-2 shootdown disaster with an obvious solution: adapt U.S. reconnaissance systems to operate in space. Just as with the tug-of-war between the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology and the Navy over control of the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office in the early 1970s. And go watch my Navy Legacy Programs video to learn more, as I had to convince former US Navy admirals of the NRO's existence since they were not read into this agency. Upon its immediate inception, the NRO displayed similar fractured directions split between the US DoD and intelligence community. Initially, the National Reconnaissance Office featured co-directors. The first co-directors of the agency were Joseph V. Cherick, Chief Scientist and Undersecretary of the Air Force, as well as CIA officer Richard Bissell, Jr. Bissell, of course, was mentioned by the late presidential advisor, Institute for Defense Analyses FFRDC employee, and highly likely CIA officer himself, Harold Malmgren, as a deep UFO Legacy Program member.
What else did Richard Bissell tell you?
Well, I think I've explained. In essence, there are a multiplicity of powers in play at any moment. And around presidents, they have certain powers, but they are constrained by these other powers. And among them, the intelligence community is very powerful because it has found ways to fund itself and to multiply itself. So you can't look at the budget and say that's what it is.
According to Malmgren, Bissell directly confirmed the validity of the 1933 Magenta, Italy UFO crash.
Yeah, what else did Richard Bissell tell you?
He said this didn't start last week. This has been going on. He mentioned 1933 Magenta.
He did?
Yes.
Richard Bissell mentioned the 1933 Magenta crash?
Yes.
That's amazing.
That the U.S. had offensively downed UFOs in maritime settings, likely recovered with efforts from the NRO and NURO, and that Bissell had briefed Malmgren on quote-unquote otherworldly technologies. Many valid questions and criticisms have been raised regarding the credibility of Malmgren, but I personally believe what doesn't compute with his work history can be rationalized as Malmgren was likely CIA himself. But back to the topic. By 1962, the NRO had settled into its modern-day joint DoD and IC role, with the director of the NRO being appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Defense and deputy director being appointed by the CIA. Upon its creation, the NRO immediately harnessed control of the wildly successful Corona program, which wasn't declassified until 1995. Corona was a top-secret spy satellite project launched in 1960 before the NRO's creation that took high-resolution photos of denied airspace on film and physically ejected capsules to be captured in air by American assets. And Corona, of course, is another example of IMINT or Imagery Intelligence. The first missions with Corona were a resounding success, bolstering faith in U.S. reconnaissance satellites. In 1962, the NRO not only operated with the CIA to fly the A-12 Oxcart, the successor to the U-2 for ISR missions, but also worked with the Naval Research Laboratory to launch the Poppy reconnaissance satellites, a signals intelligence or SIGINT platform that detected Russian radar signals. By 1964, just a few years after its creation, the NRO had already gathered the world's first radar imagery from orbit. Another example here of IMINT, through a satellite codenamed Quill that harnessed synthetic aperture radar. Indeed, within just 4 years of operation, the NRO had already proved its worth 50 times over by acquiring SIGINT, ELINT, and IMINT data from the Soviet Union. The 1960s and 1970s were a very iterative period for the NRO, which saw the office upgrade their current systems, largely improving on the Corona and Poppy projects. One of the NRO's most desirable tasks was to improve their photo reconnaissance program, allowing IMINT to be transmitted electronically, not literally collected in the air by airplanes.
The last piece of the puzzle was to finally make surveillance photography electronically transmittable to Earth. The nation's best engineers worked diligently to increase digital photographic resolution, bandwidth, and download speeds, and in 1976, they succeeded.
To accomplish this near real-time photo transfer, in 1976, the NRO launched the Kennen, aka KH-11 Kennen. KH here stands for Keyhole, the NRO's code word for their photo reconnaissance program. Think of the Keyhole 11 Kennen and Keyhole satellites at large as massive orbiting digital cameras that spy on anyone and anything deemed a threat to US national security. By the 1980s, Keyhole IMINT satellites were so sensitive for the NRO, these systems could detect the dimensions of small arms on a battlefield from space, able to detect objects less than 12 inches long. And I know what you're thinking. Did these systems detect UFOs? Well, of course, this answer is yes, and I will make that argument soon. With the public declassification of the NRO in 1992, the NRO programs A, B, C, and D were replaced with functional directorates. Think of how the CIA has the Directorate of Science and Technology or Directorate of Operations. I think that the NRO programs A, B, C, and D allow us the most simple and effective way to analyze early efforts of the office. Program A saw the NRO work specifically with the U.S. Air Force satellite reconnaissance elements. Program C saw the NRO work specifically with U.S. Navy satellite reconnaissance elements. Program D saw the NRO work with the CIA in the acquisition and support of aerial reconnaissance or aircraft projects. Think the SR-71 or A-12 Oxcart. And finally, Program B saw the NRO work specifically with the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology satellite reconnaissance elements. The ground element of this project, Project B, is to this day stationed at Pine Gap, Australia. From 1982 to 1989, the director of NRO Program B was one Mr. R. Everett or Evans Heinemann, who was infamously named by Admiral Bobby Ray Inman to NASA mission specialist Bob Eschler as the guy to speak to regarding UFO crash retrievals, and of course, more on him later. As of 2025, the NRO has completed several hundred launches of space-borne payloads known as NROL. The total number here is indeed impossible to track, as the amount of clandestine classified NRO systems currently in orbit probably doubles acknowledged launches. Indeed, in October of 2024, NRO Director Chris Scalisi stated between just June 2023 to December 2024, the NRO had launched 100 satellites. Due to the hellacious cost of getting a satellite into orbit, the NRO often piggybacks with choice partners to ride-share missions to get their assets into space. Such partners include SpaceX, which back in April 2025, SpaceX alone launched 3 NRO missions in the span of 8 days, as well as an intriguing 2006 joint venture between Lockheed Martin and Boeing called United Launch Alliance. In recent years, the NRO has begun using a strategy called proliferated architecture. which sees the office deploy numerous small satellites across many launches instead of a few large singular satellites to increase data delivery and network resilience. These networks are arranged into what are known as constellations. And the NRO maintains 4 acknowledged satellite constellations. And these include SIGINT, GeoINT, Comms Relay, and Reconnaissance. And the NRO also likely operates within an immaculate constellation. As I will argue throughout this video, I strongly believe the NRO's role within UFO legacy program operations sees the agency supply various support and technical intelligence gathering systems and platforms to monitor UFOs. And these UFOs likely include technical vehicles entering or leaving Earth's atmosphere known as fastwalkers, UFOs over nuclear sites, transmedium craft, and more. I additionally theorize that the NRO leverages its unrivaled intelligence collection platforms to provide direct ISR to UFO retrieval teams. I ultimately think the NRO has an argument to be considered as the vanguard of clandestine agencies, offices, or departments that leverages derivative technologies for feudalistic dominance and asymmetrical warfare advantages, and more on that later. Let's begin with the first theory here, as we have some tangible, relevant, and recent data to investigate. Before the NRO's very declassification in 1992, the agency's very creation had been associated with UFO monitoring projects. Let us look to the work of the legendary Leonard Stringfield to crash retrieval status reports 1 through 7. Specifically, Status Report 6, The Inner Sanctum, published in 1991. And let us analyze the testimony of one Albert Bruce Collins, aka Barnabas. Much of Stringfield's work here came from UFO researcher Tim Cooper, one of the primary researchers who received significant drops of Majestic 12 documents in the 1980s. Collins claimed to be a metallurgical engineer and retired government employee. Specifically, Collins claimed he developed metal alloys used for electromagnetic propagation and magnetic propulsion from 1942 to the late 50s. And it's important to note here, I cannot confirm Collins' claims of an accomplished metallurgical engineering career. While Collins did indeed die on 30 December 1990, all I can confirm in obituaries is he was a veteran, member of the NRA, and a nature conservancy. Collins claimed to have observed a recovered UFO resting on a flatbed truck housed within a large warehouse at the University of California, Berkeley in 1947. According to Collins, he stood but just 100 feet away from an oval-shaped craft, 30 to 40 feet in diameter and roughly 15 feet high. This craft was described as appearing similar to an egg, with the shell cracked and yolk still inside. The craft was metallic, similar to polished aluminum, with a silvery-looking finish. And Collins guessed that this craft suffered an internal explosion, with the metal exterior of the craft seemingly pushed out. The retrieved vehicle had sustained significant amounts of damage, with a large section ripped off and a huge gash on top running down the side below the seam. From his 100-foot vantage point, Collins observed a bulkhead in front with multi-layered honeycomb skin. The interior was dark, but similar to the egg analogy, there was a shiny sphere in the center of the craft surrounded by another bulkhead. The craft additionally featured a forward compartment, but Collins could not see inside. I bring up Collins' crash retrieval encounter specifically for the multi-layered honeycomb skin within the egg. This detail actually lends some credibility to Collins' testimony, and we will explore parallel avenues here shortly in our crash retrieval section. Let's talk just a little bit about Collins more here. Collins claimed to have studied metal of unknown composition and origin in an official capacity, but also claimed at this time, 1949, he learned of a multitude of agencies involved in TUO, or Technologies of Unknown Origin research. These named entities included intelligence offices from the U.S. Army, Air Force, Navy, the CIA, the RAND Corporation founded a year prior in 1948, and the Vatican. Collins added he had heard Los Alamos National Labs had been studying green fireballs and strange debris found in the desert. And this, of course, was the very real Project Twinkle at Sandia Base. Recall how the NRO was not declassified until 1992, so Collins' 1990 statements here are quite intriguing. But quick caveat, the early 70s did see some newspapers leak the existence of the NRO, so it is always possible that Collins' upcoming claims and awareness of the NRO arose from such news. Collins asserted the NRO not only sought to capture and process IMINT and other intelligence regarding, quote, orbiting spacecraft of unknown origin, end quote, but that the office was founded for this specific purpose. In the direct words of Collins, quote, the Air Force wanted to counter the black sky UFO threat by the formation of the high frontier programs for space-based weapon systems in the early 1960s. Talon Gold and Teal Ruby projects were a direct result of satellite recon photos of orbiting spacecraft of unknown origins. This led to the establishment of the NRO in 1960, end quote. Intriguing statement here by Collins, but there is little actionable intelligence to follow up on. Talon Gold and Teal Ruby were indeed very real experimental programs, spearheaded primarily by DARPA and the Air Force during the late 1970s, through the Ronald Reagan Strategic Defense Initiative, aka Star Wars.
Here, an artist's projection of the president's vision.
Banning into space, a layered defense to protect the country from nuclear devastation. U.S. spy satellites would watch the world below, detect Soviet missiles blasting off, compute the position and speed of each missile, alert battle stations in space, on Earth. The first response, space-based kinetic energy weapons fire high-speed projectiles from hypervelocity guns, intercepting enemy missiles as they are boosted through the atmosphere. Popped up into space, Earth-based nuclear-powered X-ray lasers fire their radioactive rays. Attack rays from land-based excimer lasers are redirected by huge mirrors orbiting in space. Chemical lasers fire beams that burn through the shell of the onrushing missile. Particle beam weapons with pulsing rays join the attack. Still over the atmosphere,
The Star Wars program was created under Ronald Reagan in 1983 and was meant to act as a space-based defensive system to act against Soviet nuclear ballistic missiles. I have spoken several times that I theorize, with confidence might I add, that the SDI saw numerous back-channeled funds harnessed to support clandestine UFO legacy program operations, as well as the SDI's lethality and target hardening and particle beams weapons programs actually featured backdoor capabilities to act offensively against UFOs. Talon Gold, by definition, was a project designed to serve as an essential prerequisite for deploying a high-energy laser weapon system. Talon Gold was, quote, a project to develop a low-energy laser to demonstrate acquisition and tracking of targets from space and to precisely point down a narrow laser beam, end quote. Teal Ruby, on the other hand, by definition, served as a, quote, ADI, American Defense International project to develop a satellite which could detect and track aircraft from space by IR signature measurement, end quote. Collins' assertions here that Teal Ruby and Talon Gold were very real programs oriented to track and possibly down UFOs during the 1970s and SDI as a direct result to NRO satellites detecting UFOs in the 1960s is certainly plausible in my opinion. But even without Collins' disclosures, what if I told you there is a very real program within the NRO that harnesses constellations to analyze imagery data with AI capabilities and has provably witnessed UFOs? But before we dive into that, I do want to state that NRO, NGA, IC/relevant partner analyst terminal feeds don't just magically display transmitted still imagery and video IMINT data from spy satellites and overhead collection constellations. Feeds from such systems are transmitted as encrypted code and arrive to the NRO and its partners in various raw and processed digital data formats. From there, transferred satellite feed data undergoes digital encoding before appearing as picture, video, or data in an analyst's feed. This process from raw data to picture and video is conducted in near real time, though of course there is a lag. So if you're wondering why the average NRO or NGA analyst has not blown the whistle on observing 4K IMINT records of UFOs, I strongly believe this is because raw and processed data pre-digital encoding, displaying anomalous technical vehicles or features, is removed from standard analyst feeds. Indeed, I think it is quite likely that systems are in place within NRO satellite feeds that identify such anomalies that, for example, might picture UFOs or a UFO crash site, and emit such data from analyst feeds and transfer the data to more quote-unquote cleared parties. In ages past, where data transfer was slower, I believe such a process could have been conducted manually. But with near real-time transfer today, perhaps there is a digital tool to remove such data from uncleared eyes. That tool, a little AI called SENTIENT. Anyways, in 2023, FOIA ace John Greenwald received a FOIA response regarding NRO project SENTIENT. SENTIENT serves as a, quote, ongoing research and development program, end quote, that combines problem-centric intelligence, multi-int end-to-end, and trusted machine automation to, quote, revolutionize the current collection, tasking, processing, exploitation, and dissemination, TCPED cycle across the intelligence community, end quote. SENTIENT has been described by Robert Cardillo, a former director of the NGA, as a system intended to use quote-unquote automated inferencing to aid in intelligence collection. Let's not forget here that Cardillo was possibly involved in the Lockheed Martin OSAP Kona Blue UFO materials blockage conducted by the CIA DS&T and other parties. Cardillo curiously ended up on the board of Peraton, originally Lockheed Martin Enterprise Integration Group, an arm of Lockheed Martin that contained many of Lockheed's black budget projects, that was severed from the company and eaten up by Veritas Capital shortly after the failed Kona Blue transfer in 2010. But indeed, this highly classified system has actually provable instances of detecting UFOs. On the 2nd of June 2022, the NRO released a document titled, quote, Recent Sentient Highlights, end quote, from data collected on 6 May 2021. This document details how Sentient detected a possible airborne object below 10 meters in diameter that, quote, vaguely resembles similar detections of airborne objects by U.S. Navy aircraft and surface vessels in the redacted operating areas, parentheses, unidentified aerial phenomena, end quote. The NRO publicly concluded the image was tic-tac shaped and likely not a sensor artifact or focal plane anomaly. Indeed, the NRO even likened this sighting to similar phenomenon off of another redacted area. So recall back to what I said about satellite feed data. I think it is highly probable systems such as Sentient identify anomalous IMINT or other INT data from NRO constellations, remove the data from standard analyst feeds, and directly deliver the data to more cleared, quote-unquote, in-the-know personnel. In that same year of 2021, the NRO additionally contributed to the ODNI's report to the Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees on progress made by the UAP Task Force. Sentient Plus contribution to the report are an interesting juxtaposition, seen as they actually contradict a 2015 statement made by the NRO, which states it had no documentation related to UFOs and that the topic was, quote, outside of the scope of NRO responsibilities. Furthermore, the NRO has conducted numerous searches in the past and has located no records, end quote. But this sentient UFO data, why would Sentient flag and possibly isolate this data? And to whom would be delivered such data on UFOs?
You are the author of what the world knows as the Immaculate Constellation Report.
Based on the information included in there and its description, the mission becomes apparent, and that is a bare minimum. It's the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission of a global nature for UAPs and RVs, ARVs.
In 2024, whistleblower Matthew Brown delivered the Immaculate Constellation report to Congress through Jeremy Corbell. Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program, or one of my all-time favorite acronyms, a USAP, established in 2017 with the primary mission of, quote, collecting imagery intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, and ARV/RV reproduction vehicles, utilizing tasked and untasked U.S. military intelligence resources, end quote. And to quote again, quote, Immaculate Constellation acts as a nexus for collecting, analyzing, and disseminating intelligence on the activities, capabilities, and locations of anomalous aerospace threats that originate from foreign or unidentified sources, end quote. One such tasked U.S. military intelligence resource, according to Brown, well, NRO SENTIENT.
Yeah, at that point, I definitely knew the phenomena was absolutely real. I knew we were tracking it. I knew we had lots of resources on it for some time. But getting to that final step in the ladder and seeing oh, and the cover-up is real, and it's inside the house.
Give us a sense of, you read one document that said Immaculate Constellation and it had some images with it. What additional information did you come across that reinforced your belief that there is a big surveillance program collecting this stuff?
Well, I mean, one is just the fact of its existence, right? In the brief, it's talking about the general mission. It's giving examples, but it's clearly talking about a collection mission. And then there's programs that have since become public. The most relevant one in this case is the NRO SENTIENT program that kind of, at least in the open source way, demonstrates how you don't need a massive workforce to do this anymore. You don't need buildings without windows for acres to have people taking this information and sanitizing it, making it sure it gets to the right people without the wrong things in it. And that's just on the inside.
Perhaps Immaculate Constellation, or IMCON as I will call it from here on out, relies quite heavily on NRO SENTIENT. Seeing as IMCON was established in 2017, and although SENTIENT began development in 2010, its core build-out occurred in 2016. And to me, this is absolutely imperative to mention, and I cannot state this point enough. IMCON is not a UFO legacy program. IMCON is a reactionary USAP established in 2017 to get eyes and ears on both non-human craft and derivative technologies, which includes alien reproduction vehicles. The establishment of IMCON likely has parallels to congressional inquiries established in 2017 by Senators Marco Rubio and Kirsten Gillibrand to investigate UFOs and UFO legacy programs. UFO legacy programs, on the other hand, have existed for at least 80 years, siloed since at least 1947, and have operated under parallel oversight channels harnessing DoD/IC elements, DIB infrastructure, FFRDCs and prime contractors, and likely trillions and trillions of dollars to accomplish their modus operandi: to retrieve, store, understand, leverage, and exploit technologies of unknown origin for the expressed purpose of feudalistic dominance and asymmetrical warfare advantages. IMCON is not such a legacy program. Indeed, just as IMCON was likely established to capture more IMINT, MASINT, and other data around anomalous vehicles in our sky, oceans, and atmosphere, IMCON was also likely established as a reactionary countermeasure to attempt to assess the technological maturity of UFO legacy program assets, both foreign and domestic. This is actually comical to me, as I believe the NRO is up to its eyeballs in UFO legacy programs as well as intimately involved in the reactionary USAP IMCON. Though these programs and USAP are siloed from one another and likely do not interact whatsoever. This in turn implies only specific personnel, groups, directorates, etc. within the NRO are involved in UFO legacy programs that are separate from another USAP, which is Immaculate Constellation. The overwhelming majority of personnel within the agency are unaware of both such programs. Indeed, within the IMCON report itself, dutifully written by Matthew Brown, references are made to IMCON USAP compartmentalization through IMINT databases scattered across various organizations and services, leading to a fragmented ownership structure itself within IMCON. Whether it be legacy programs or reactionary USAPs like IMCON, similar patterns can be observed in other DoD/IC agencies. For example here, just because the 160th SOAR A 1st Battalion, aka the 160th Special Operations Aviation Command, is involved in UFO crash retrievals, does not mean the 160th SOAR 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Battalion are involved in retrievals, or even aware of such 1st Battalion involvement. Indeed, in another example here, just because the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology and its Deputy Director participates in UFO legacy programs at an admin level, does not mean the CIA's Directorate of Digital Innovations and its Deputy Director is aware of such CAPS or Controlled Access programs. NRO and IMCOM, in my opinion, is a fantastic way to visualize compartmentalization in UFO legacy programs. IMCON really does warrant a video of its own, but let's continue to break down this USAP a little more, and some of the interesting data presented and how such data relates to the NRO. The IMCON report delivered to Congress states IMCON intelligence consists primarily of high-quality IMINT with collateral MASINT of both UFO and ARV. This implies both tasked and non-tasked NRO satellite constellations are the primary source for IMCON intelligence. As recall, the NRO is the primary U.S. agency for space-based IMINT. I am particularly fond of a few cases mentioned within this document. One case depicted a large disk using clouds as concealment over Indo-PACOM or Indo-Pacific Command, recorded by a space-based collection platform employing OPIR, or Overhead Persistent Infrared Systems. Since the NRO is a part of the JOPC, or Joint Overhead Persistent Infrared Center, providing OPIR sensors, I think it is quite safe to assume the NRO recorded such an event. This event depicted a saucer between roughly 210 to 420 feet in diameter, with symmetrical concavities on the upper surface, emerge above cloud coverage, traveling upward to the outer atmosphere. As soon as the technical object broke above the clouds, the saucer suddenly reversed direction back into cloud cover. Such evasive maneuvers implied the saucer became aware it was under observation by a space-based platform. Additionally, over U.S. SOUTHCOM, or Southern Command, IMCON details a tic-tac detected by a space asset. Again, OPIR imagery implying an NRO collection platform. This footage depicted a tic-tac-shaped UFO transiting through an area of the Atlantic. Could this possibly be the 2021 tic-tac event captured by SENTIENT? And of course, guys, you know me. And whilst these events cannot be tied to the NRO specifically, as collected footage was recorded quite close to incident location from ocean vessels, I am absolutely swoon with cases of alien reproduction vehicle triangles being recorded over Indo-PACOM. Indeed, perhaps we can find early discussions of IMCON, not by name, but by concept in players, dating all the way back to 2017.
I recognized that there were people in government that wanted to engage the public on topics that unfortunately had a stigma even though they were based in scientific fact. At the time, there was no mechanism for them to do this. Through a series of meetings, I was soon connected to a large group of U.S. government officials, from the CIA, the Department of Defense, and Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. These guys were the ones involved in the secretive U.S. government programs that dealt with these subjects. And they have all taken tremendous risks to themselves and their reputations to do something that can benefit the world. They wanted to be a part of something special, to be a part of a company that could not only change the way we see ourselves, but also change the path humanity is on.
Now, I talked before in my Lockheed project about the enigma that is Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy. On Joe Rogan episode 1029, released on 26 October 2017, rockstar Tom DeLonge discussed the inception of To the Stars Academy, a group of his advised by Air Force Major General Neil McCasland, Air Force Major General Michael Carey, Hillary Clinton campaign manager John Podesta, Hal Puthoff, Chris Mellon, Luis Elizondo, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works Executive Vice President Rob Weiss, and 30-plus year Skunk Works veteran Steve Justice. These bizarre relationships with the Lockheed Skunk Works, Air Force, OSAP personnel, lifelong counterintelligence agents, and Clinton family, who, by the way, I believe Hillary was attempting to poise herself up as the disclosure president, would see Tom and TTSA seek to utilize group investments to build from scratch, might I add, free energy technology for energy and aerospace programs. Technology seemingly magically forgotten from many of the individuals listed above who likely had direct exposure to UFO legacy programs and derivative technology, some of whom even perhaps participated in program protection strategies. The entire TTSA saga is so bizarre, as is the inclusion of figures like Mellon, Elizondo, and Puthoff in institutions like Lockheed Skunk Works. You know, as I once stated before, perhaps we will cover DeLonge and TTSA more in the future, as I would like to relate Tom's efforts to the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies 10-month report dated 30 July 2009 while contracting under the OSAP program. There is a theory here that Tom was targeted by Elizondo and Mellon to execute an updated version of a leftover idea that was Project Forum, as detailed by this vast 10-month report. A proposed 2010 report that sought to, quote, raise the level of awareness of the importance of ET and the potential of disclosure in North America, end quote, by beginning with popular figures in California. So, that infamous JRE episode 1029, where Tom revealed TTSA and discussed his understanding of UFOs. There is a clue in that episode I believe reveals some answers if we really narrow in and pay attention.
You know, you have people at the National Reconnaissance Office that have a perspective based on the satellite feeds they're getting, and these things are coming in and out of the atmosphere. Then you also have people from the agency that are worried about and collecting information of what's going on with people in different countries and here. But then you also have, you know, engineers that have a perspective on how the technology is made and what that might mean, because there's a lot of consciousness stuff that falls into this category.
Can I stop you right there? So there's satellites that track them coming in and out of the atmosphere?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
What kind of satellites are these?
I don't know. Usually forward-looking infrared, but I don't know what spectrum of the infrared they're looking at.
So there's some sort of a camera or some sort of a detection device that they have in the atmosphere just to check for UFOs?
I don't know if it's just for UFOs. They can pick up very, very specific heat signatures, and they have algorithms, because what you have is a satellite is a device that can pick up what you program it to pick up. Now, you know, you put a sensor on there, but you got to tell the sensor what to do.
Right.
So if the sensor says, look, something traveling at this speed with this kind of heat, you know, you got to record that, you got to focus on it, and that's what we call an ICBM. But if something comes in and zigzags, stops, and turns left, and it's traveling 10 times faster than that, we need you to record that and focus in on that as well. But if something just is moving low and it's only going 300 miles an hour and it has these big wings and a low whatever, that's just a plane, you know. So what it captures is based on, you know, how it's programmed in the first place. But
so it can differentiate between meteorites and
absolutely,
spaceships.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
okay. So how often are these things coming into our atmosphere?
Oh, I don't know, but I've had quite a few discussions. One of the people I've been in contact. One of my advisors was from the National Reconnaissance Office, high up, and they call it episodic visits. That's all I know.
Episodic, meaning like they have time periods where they like.
I saw a paper where they
semesters.
I figured out the Department of Defense figured out a physicist there, an algorithm of how to compute when the things fly in and collect smaller ships, like motherships, small ships, at what longitude and latitude, and what essentially what orbit it would land at when it would collect these other machines. And so they tested that, and all I know is it was successful.
DeLonge stated advisors from the NRO informed him of episodic visits of UFOs. and that even individuals analyzing these episodic visits in an official capacity, presumably the NRO, were able to determine where, if not also when, UFOs would arrive with frightening accuracy. Now, recall IMCON, and let's observe that multiple collection case reports outright state that collection systems seemingly possessed foreknowledge or prior awareness of UFO incidents. Oh yeah, and one of these events where intelligence suggested foreknowledge of a UFO's trajectory was the Tic Tac over Southcom. Possibly the same 2021 incident recorded in the SENTIENT report. Perhaps NRO scientists really did figure out successful and reliable methods to predict times and locations to collect multiple types of intelligence on pattern-exhibiting UFOs, whether this be non-human craft or ARV. Because of the strong similarities here, the question must be asked. Did someone connected to the NRO inform Tom DeLonge of episodic visits of UFOs captured by Immaculate Constellation data collection tasking the same year of IMCON's establishment, 2017? Well, I believe a strong argument can be made that the answer here is a resounding yes. And if this is indeed the case, I also believe the most important question here is who seemingly told Tom of USAP details 7 years before Matthew Brown disclosed the existence of this reactionary USAP? Well, putting some pieces together here, I believe this is likely Luis Elizondo himself. I am not sure if this is public information or not, so I take a risk here discussing this. While Director of Global Security and Special Programs for To the Stars Academy from 2017 to 2021, Elizondo performed liaison duties with multiple U.S. agencies for TTSA, including the DIA, CIA, and NRO. Someone should really ask Mr. Elizondo if he was indeed exposed or read into Immaculate Constellation between 2017 and 2021, and provided either unauthorized or, strangely enough, authorized disclosures to Tom DeLonge of TTSA. I think the true answer here might be surprising. However, as IMCON is a USAP, Elizondo would be forced to deny knowledge of this program. I also believe a case can be made, and that it is highly likely that American hero and whistleblower David Grusch had first-hand exposure to NRO Sentient, NRO-collected UFO IMINT, and other INT system signatures, and possibly Immaculate Constellation, and responsibly disclose such knowledge sworn in before Congress. I really do hate to talk about Grusch and Elizondo together in the same project, let alone the same section, but this really must be done here. As per his public CV, Grusch worked from 2021 up until his departure from federal service in April of 2023 as a senior GeoInt or Geospatial Intelligence Capabilities Requirements Officer, the equivalent of a full bird colonel or GS-15 for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency or NGA. In this position, Grusch served as lead SME for U.S. Spacecom National Support Team NST, for cross-agency program integration, as well as a senior technical advisor for UAP/transmedium issues. Indeed, during this timeframe, it is also well known Grusch was liaison to the UAP Task Force in his roles for both the NRO and NGA. Indeed, thanks again to John Greenwald of the Black Vault for in 2024 publishing FOIA documents detailing communications between the NRO and UAP Task Force. Within the documents, we can see a 7 May 2021 communication stating, quote, NGA, NASIC, redacted, DIA/redacted, and NRO have consulted with the UAPTF on the availability of GeoInt assets capable of collecting range-Fowler data, performing analysis of full-motion video, still images, and redacted data, end quote. So, what did Grusch say when Representative Moskowitz asked him about satellite imagery of UFOs?
Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grusch, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
It seems that Grusch shares my sentiment here, that he is confounded as to why such UFO data has been kept from congressional oversight. I am most intrigued by Grusch stating he was unable to comment in an open session of his knowledge of overhead imagery capturing UFO crash sites. This is an interesting point and transitions perfectly into our next segment on NRO crash retrieval teams. So if indeed Grusch was witnessing NRO and NGA collected overhead intelligence depicting UFO crash sites, possibly, if not likely, captured by the NRO sentient program, the question here must be asked: was this data then shared with Immaculate Constellation? Or was David Grusch exposed to parallel NRO and NGA intelligence collection systems utilized by UFO legacy programs? Recall how I stated IMCON is not a UFO legacy program. IMCON was established as a reactionary USAP in 2017 to monitor and collect intelligence on UFOs and ARV. Legacy programs deal with full spectrum collection to exploitation of UFOs, and since at least the 1940s/1950s, has likely dedicated specific rapid reaction teams to recover downed UFOs worldwide. Logically, such powerful programs that operate under parallel minimal oversight chains and feature a seemingly unlimited budget, reach, and scope would harness data from every overhead collection system from Corona to Sentient to monitor the globe for UFO crash retrievals. Nowhere in the extensive IMCON report is mention made to crash imagery of UFOs. Thus, I believe such intelligence was outside of the scope of IMCON, likely because, unlike the tracked UFOs, crash sites are not predictable, nor are they episodic. I believe it is likely UFO data from the NRO/NGA collection platforms has historically been siphoned off to UFO legacy programs. And since 2017, a competing program has attempted to siphon off similar data to gain a foothold in understanding UFOs and derivative technologies. But last thing before we move on here. Legacy operations and/or Immaculate Constellation basically commandeering U.S. intelligence assets and supplanting traditional authorities for their own expressed mission directives should be absolutely huge news, right? Well, recently in 2025, we saw a brave man speak about such a topic. Jim Schell is a space domain awareness and orbital debris expert with many years as a project manager and technical director within the NRO and chief scientist for Air Force Space Command. In September of 2025, Schell took to LinkedIn with a post titled, quote, "Time to Speak Up, Postured for Operational Surprise," end quote. Here, Schell discussed a security control system within the U.S. national security space, fostering abuse and interfering with critical missions. Schell alleged with high confidence that, quote, "a security control system is supplanting the direction and authority of the U.S. Space Force and U.S. Space Comm," end quote. And, quote, "there is a direct and unauthorized interference of the space domain awareness mission in violation of explicit official policy," end quote. Even with medium confidence, Schell alleged funds have been misappropriated and that there is a connection to unidentified anomalous phenomena activity. I only ever so briefly wanted to mention Schell here, in the context of UFO legacy programs and/or Immaculate Constellation, circumnavigating SpaceCom assets with secret and unknown control authorities. His statement and discussion of his complaint to the Inspector General is well worth reading for yourself. As I've already stated many times throughout this video, one of the primary objectives of this investigation is to explore the NRO's alleged role in UFO crash retrieval missions, as well as assess why I believe the NRO is likely the first US agency that would be equipped with derivative technology or alien reproduction vehicles for live ISR missions. Let us satisfy these goals by analyzing the structure of crash retrieval teams, exploring anonymous and named witness testimonies, and addressing the testimony of a first-hand witness I have had the pleasure of speaking with that has claimed to serve on a UFO retrieval team with multiple missions under their belt. Let's recall a 20 September 2024 article by Christopher Sharp of the Liberation Times titled, quote, "Paradigm-changing UFO transparency legislation fails in Congress for second consecutive year," end quote. This superb piece has served as a cornerstone of my research in how I analyze UFO crash retrieval teams. This article by Sharp saw 3 total iterations, an initial redaction of agencies named due to Sharp fearing reprisals and possible endangerment of his life. But ultimately, Sharp reposted the original article, albeit slightly altered, after some Twitter harassment. I prefer to address the original article here, as this is the most robust rendition of this piece. Within the article, Sharp writes, quote, "Multiple programs are understood to be orchestrated by the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology and its Directorate of Operations, including its maritime branch, alongside components of the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, U.S. Navy, National Reconnaissance Office, Space Command, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC. According to Liberation Times sources, missions carried out by these programs include the retrieval of objects from beneath the oceans, involving the CIA's Directorate of Operations, the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, coordinated between the CIA and U.S. Navy, United States Special Operations Command, and submersibles from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Additionally, the retrieval of objects on foreign soil is conducted with the involvement of the CIA's Office of Global Access and Joint Special Operations Command," end quote. Let's break down these roles a little bit, as I'm in firm solidarity with Sharp here, even though I do think he is missing a few very critical pieces of the puzzle. Maritime elements within this post include the NRO, Navy, CIA Directorate of Operations, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, etc. All of these institutions and more were addressed at length in my Naval UFO Legacy Programs project, so I highly recommend checking that out. Indeed, whether maritime or land-based UFO retrievals, roles these agencies allegedly play in such clandestine missions are quite easy to solve and ration through. JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, a subordinate command of SOCOM, or Special Operations Command, consists of 5 Tier 1 units. Naval SEAL Team 6, aka DevGRU, Army Regimental Reconnaissance Company, aka RRC, the Air Force 24th Special Tactics Squadron, aka the 24th STS, Army's Delta Force, and the Army Intelligence Support Activity, or ISA. Intriguingly, an individual and supposed disclosure advocate that I consider had extensive experience in UFO legacy programs, Luis Elizondo, was actually former ISA, and before the JSOC, the ISA existed under U.S. Army INSCOM, or Intelligence and Security Command. Recall how INSCOM was formerly run by Major General Albert Stubblebine, who was obsessed with what you could call psychic phenomena for military application. An intriguing rabbit hole I have discussed before many times. JSOC's role in such retrieval teams, although I do believe these crash retrieval groups feature Tier 1 assets under parallel chains of command free from traditional oversight, serve as direct action units in crash retrieval teams. Such teams would operate to secure areas, subdue threats, and eliminate hostiles if applicable. In such teams, the NRO, NGA, and NRO would provide full-spectrum ISR support for the missions. This makes logistical practical sense as well. If the NRO is our eyes and ears in space and has a history of UFO detection including their sentient system, the NRO would utilize IMINT and likely SIGINT collection to detect and monitor UFO crash sites or detect UFOs to be painted as targets for downing and retrieval. And again, recall back to the comments of David Grusch.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Indeed, the CIA's Office of Global Access would act as a logistics coordinator for missions OCONUS, or outside the continental United States. And the CIA's Office of Global Access, or OGA, would serve as the glue behind this joint task force, if so to speak. This is beyond critical to mention, but this CIA OGA was started in 2003 by CIA Directorate of Science and Technology Deputy Director Doug Wolf. And remember this because it is paramount to our investigation here later on. In our NRO Gatekeeper section, we will explore incredible connections between UFO Legacy Program gatekeepers and common threads, including the NRO, OGA, CIA DS&T, Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Acquisition, Technology, and Facilities, and finally the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. I strongly recommend you stay tuned for that. And equally critical to mention again, the OGA operates as a logistics coordinator for retrievals outside the United States. And this is where I think Chris is missing a few steps we can actually fill in. I am absolutely quite confident that UFO crash retrieval teams feature full-spectrum intelligence support from the NRO, NGA, NURO, CIA and their DS&T, and direct action support from parallel Tier 1 units. And if the mission is outside the CONUS, we can expect support from the CIA OGA and greater JSOC involvement. So, what is missing here for these UFO crash retrieval teams? For one, what agency or office would be responsible for transporting on-site scientific and direct action personnel, and possibly responsible with the transportation of recovered vehicles? Well, I strongly believe this is the U.S. Army 160th SOAR, or Special Operations Aviation Regiment, aka the Night Stalkers. Specifically, the 1st Battalion that we talked about earlier. The Night Stalkers are essentially the helicopter transports for SOF, or Special Forces, specifically JSOC. I believe the Night Stalkers in particular utilize rapid reaction teams piloting CH-47s and MH-47s to transport on-site crash retrieval personnel, and again, possibly recover and transport out vehicles. A strong example of this is likely the 1997 testimony of USMC Lance Corporal Jonathan Wygant, who during his station in Operation Laser Strike, an aerial counter-narcotics program in Peru, happened upon a large egg-shaped UFO crash.
This is the craft. This is pretty crude two-dimensional drawing, but this is jungle here, and this was the craft, and it was embedded in the rock like this, and I'm not sure if this tapered off or how it went, but these right here are the hatches, these two objects here. This one was the one that was half open, and you could see into it, but I mean, it was just black. It was like looking into a closet.
Where were you standing?
Damage, I think, from the missile. And these were these large vents. They looked like they went into the craft, but I couldn't tell. But I mean, it was a shadow. That was the only thing that really cast a shadow. The rest of this, well, this was another thing, was these vents casted a shadow where you could see where there wasn't light, but the sun was shining right on the object, and it didn't cast a shadow. Not on anything, and it was like kind of like absorbing the light. It was weird, strange. There was no reflection or anything like that.
Wygant and his fellow Marines were intercepted by men in black fatigues wearing black U.S. Army helmets. These men featured no insignia, flags, or name tags. These men, in my opinion, were either local 7th Army SOF units or dedicated Tier 1 parallel crash retrieval assets. Whilst being held at gunpoint, 2 U.S. Army CH-47s landed carrying Department of Energy personnel, equipped in DOE-embroidered rain jackets and mission-oriented protective posture, aka MOP gear, likely to secure the crash site and debris.
Yeah, they threw me into the mud, and all that liquid got in my hair and my face. They were like scientists, I suppose. They had this type of we'd call it MOP gear, right? Mission-oriented protective posture. And they had gas masks on and like rubber suits, and they were coming around, and you had all kinds of weird people there. Some had some version of MOP or personal protective posture on, and personal protective gear, and it was all different ones, different kinds.
This also brings us to the second point that I believe Chris Sharp is missing in his excellent article. The men in MOP gear with DOE insignia that Weygand observed. This would be Department of Energy and their semi-autonomous subordinate agency created in the year 2000, the National Nuclear Security Administration, operating a direct response on-site scientific team to react to crashed UFOs. And I strongly believe this is the DOE NEST, or Nuclear Emergency Support Team. NEST is the USG's premier response unit for assessing and operating contingencies on any nuclear or radiological threat. The mission of NEST is to, quote, be prepared to respond immediately to any type of radiological accident or incident anywhere in the world, end quote. NEST's authority is derived from the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement. Recently, in my project on Sandia National Labs, I outlined old Atomic Energy Commission classification standards that UFO legacy programs likely utilize to keep UFO missions, materials, data, biologics, etc. away from declassification and traditional oversight channels. These include transclassified foreign nuclear information, which was actually identified in 3 consecutive years as a UFO legacy program gatekeeping method in the UAPDA, special nuclear material, and non-contract foreign intelligence information, or FII. Indeed, I have outlined in the same Sandia project why I believe for CONUS-based UFO retrieval missions and UFO material transport between secure facilities. Outside of NEST, legacy programs additionally utilize DOE/NNSA Special Response Teams SRTs and the Office of Secure Transportation OST. So what if I told you I have taken a witness testimony never before heard that compiles all of this data together and places the NRO as the actual focal point? I will preface here that this testimony should not be taken as evidence, but more so for consideration in this project. This testimony should serve as little more than conjecture to the audience, but I will be quite firm after speaking to this individual and investigating them for many, many, many months. I must state, I do in fact believe their testimony. In 2025, I came in contact with a man whom I had attempted to get in contact with for the better part of a year. This individual claimed to serve within a UFO crash retrieval rapid reaction team during the 21st century for a period of multiple years. This team was allegedly based out of the Nevada National Security Site, aka the Nevada Test Site. This individual states he was part of a special detachment within the teams, a detachment that operated alongside DOE assets in MOP gear to secure debris and clean up crash areas. This division operated cargo, transport, and initial CBRNE risk assessment. 2 other divisions higher up the food chain here generally did mission tasking, and one division, Delta, consisted of a company-sized element of parallel Tier 1 units, sometimes ranging between as much to 20 to 40. This Delta detachment was first to secure crash areas, dressed in, of course, all black. Once secure, this individual's detachment would deploy to the crash site. Does this at all sound familiar to Weygand? The Delta detachment would come and go, but the witness in his detachment rotated through acknowledged and unacknowledged sites on the Nevada Test Site, including Nellis and Homey, another name for Area 51. When he began his training before any live UFO retrievals, the witness attended briefings on crash retrieval duties. Nothing out of the ordinary here, just standard crash retrieval work on prosaic airframes and materials. But on the front of these briefing binders sat an insert sheet titled, quote, Joint Operations Task Force, NRO, end quote. Indeed, during his tenure in the teams, the witness was equipped with a badge. The witness has graciously given me permission to recreate and feature this badge in this video. The badge here is a standard identification card, on the back sat a large Q hologram, likely indicating a Q clearance, the DOE's equivalent to a top-secret clearance. And it's worth noting the witness states he was never overtly given a Q clearance. The back also features a standard mag swipe for swiping into barracks and locations, as well as another feature the witness can't directly recall. On the front of the card sat Department of Defense at the top, also a photo of the cardholder, a barcode, and the first and last name of the card's owner. Towards the bottom of the card sat NRO with a large watermark behind it. For all intents and purposes, this program the witness claimed he served in was an NRO-run UFO rapid reaction team at the Nevada test site. And we are actually going to utilize one of this individual's alleged operations to transfer into another intriguing anonymous account of UFO crash retrievals that I strongly believe involves the same elements and agencies, including the NRO we have spoken on thus far. On one such operation, the witness was ordered to the scene of a crashed UFO pancaked into the jungle in what seemed to be Central or South America. This craft was egg-shaped, half buried in the mud, and featured a massive gash on its side. The witness was able to get a good look at this craft twice before the vehicle was concealed with a tent or camo net. The ever so slight glimpses of this egg's interior the witness was able to steal revealed what looked to be a double hull within the craft. Remember back to Albert Bruce Collins and the egg-shaped craft that featured layers and a possible secondary bulkhead. So that brings me to another piece of data to analyze that may tie all of this together. The internet has fallen in love with social media whistleblower testimonies. In particular, folks adore the 2023 4chan whistleblower. This alleged former legacy program individual captured the community's zeitgeist by discussing large quote-unquote motherships hidden under Earth and our oceans that essentially builds UFOs to spec. While I find this post very engaging and actually lean towards there being quite a bit of validity here, as I've been exposed to similar concepts from legacy program first-handers, I do want to focus on another social media testimony significantly smaller in scope and far more mundane. In 2024, a Reddit user named montrose912 took to the subreddit r/UFO to post a submission titled, quote, whistleblowing, ex-OGA contractor, end quote. Now, briefly, OGA in this context is not the CIA's Office of Global Access. OGA here stands for Other Government Agency, a term used to refer to any government entity outside the Department of Defense, most oftentimes the CIA, but also possibly agencies like the NSA, DIA, or Department of State. OGA here is likely used so the poster would not risk identifying himself. This individual claimed to serve as an Air Force combat controller for 16 years, with his last 2 years in the Air Force being with the Tier 1 JSOC unit, the 24th STS. During training for his last final 24th STS deployment, the poster's troop chief, alongside 3 other guys on their team, randomly bailed. The departure of the men was so sudden, the rumor mill swirled that possibly someone had died, leading to their sudden departures. 16 months later, the poster moved on from 24th STS to contract with an OGA. This work, according to the poster, was incredibly dull and boring. Work detail consisted almost exclusively of sleepy surveillance and route planning. Whilst overseas on a random Wednesday morning, the poster and his OGA team got word of an arriving AC-130 with Tier 1 teams on board for OCONUS staging at the airbase. There was zero discussion of this operation, target, manifest, etc. The C-130 arrived just before dark and was met with 2 landed CH-47s already spinning ready to go, and the Tier 1 team transferred to the helicopters immediately without any delay. And just in the back of your mind, remember CH-47s and the testimony of Weygant, the witness I spoke about, and the 160th SOAR. The entire operation here was conducted strangely quietly, and 6 hours later, the helos arrived back. Within the Tier 1 team, the poster recognized his old troop chief, the one that abruptly bailed from training 16 months earlier. The presence of the troop chief was extremely bizarre to the poster, as the troop chief was in between deployments and had been home in Virginia Beach less than 1 week earlier. The troop chief appeared to be in a very strange headspace, acting bizarre and distant, and immediately boarded the C-130s back to CONUS. The chief running the OGA deployment eventually, when pressed, admitted the op was a quote-unquote crash retrieval, and that it was, quote, not one of ours, end quote. The original poster was then reprimanded severely for raising questions on this op. The next year, the poster was finally able to catch up with the troop chief in person and inquire into this operation. It was then the troop chief admitted the op was a UFO crash retrieval. According to the chief, a task force exists, comprised of Tier 1 assets, but run outside of traditional oversight channels. This task force is specifically tasked with crash retrieval. The crew chief had only been on the task force for a little over 4 years and deployed just 3 times. Most interesting to me, this task force basically runs via its own umbrella authority siloed off from any traditional IC or DoD oversight channel and quote-unquote everyone else. In 2 of the 3 ops, the chief literally had no idea what the crash was. He only knew that it wasn't a plane or a helo. The 3rd crash, however, the one the ex-OGA contractor detailed, was particularly strange. The crash site was like a dry hole, according to the chief, similar to a large bowling ball dropped from space. Blunt impact damage only, no fire, charred shrubbery, etc. The task force here recovered an oblong sphere, roughly the size of a sedan. The object was fractured, possibly from impact, and within the craft was almost like a nesting doll design, quote, like there was another one inside of it, and another inside of that, in layers, end quote. This sort of nesting doll feature is seemingly ubiquitous across several egg-shaped craft designs. From this CR task force member, to my source, to Albert Bruce Collins. I strongly think this sort of detail is critical to pay attention to moving forward, and in previous crash reports. Additionally, the witness I detailed who encountered the crashed egg somewhere in Central or South America stated the crash site was seemingly just blunt impact trauma, not explosive damage, similar to the large bowling ball analogy. Only upon his retirement was the crew chief outright told by his task force superior that the retrieved assets were of unknown origin, and that the task force knew for certain these technical vehicles were not ours. There are so many more intriguing details in this Reddit post, such as how the crew chief described how the air was soupy, like the space between 2 magnets when near the crash site. And I highly recommend reading this entire post for yourself. This task force, as outlined by the crew chief, sounds identical to the retrieval teams outlined by my source, who has claimed to operate within a special team of such a task force. Indeed, if both accounts are true, which I will go on record and outright state I believe that both are, the umbrella authority directing this task force is indeed likely the National Reconnaissance Office. With discussion of the NRO's critical role in UFO retrieval programs, I would also like to visit the claims of the enigmatic and controversial Colonel Steve Wilson, who I first spoke about in my Northrop Grumman investigation. Wilson's disclosures are indeed fascinating, but should be taken with a huge grain of salt. Wilson's testimony was primarily collected in 1996/1997, shortly before his death, from UFO researcher Richard Boyland, whose research I often question and think is incomplete and full of theories and rushed hypotheses I don't necessarily agree with. I have tried on numerous occasions to reach out to Dr. Boyland to request Colonel Wilson's military documents, photos, medals, or any materials on this enigmatic figure, But alas, this has been to no avail, as my half-dozen emails to Boyland have gone unanswered. And thus, we are still unable to definitively prove Wilson's claimed 40-year DoD and IC background. So, while we discuss Wilson, I also thoroughly recommend Kevin Randall's multiple pieces questioning the credibility and legitimacy of Wilson so we can have a fair and balanced analysis. In my opinion, Randall gives fair criticism of Wilson's 40 years of listed service, as well as Wilson's alleged DD-214 Boyland reprinted and didn't post images of. To summarize Wilson's disclosures, Wilson claimed in 1963 as a captain in the Tactical Fighter Squadron out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He was assigned to none other than the Majestic 12 and promoted to captain. Eventually, the then Major learned of the MJ-12's modus operandi: to control, quote, UFO surveillance and interdictions, retrievals, and analysis of recovered extraterrestrial spacecraft and occupants, and public access to any information about these matters, end quote. As part of his duties, Wilson would be assigned to the 1st Special Forces Air Command and would undergo special training with Delta Force and the then Black Berets. For 9 years, the colonel claimed to visit nearly every Air Force base in the world and make contact for key people for the MJ-12 unit. Colonel Wilson stated, whilst a lieutenant colonel around 1972, he was reassigned from 1st Special Forces Air Command at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California to Area S4 near Papoose Lake, south of Area 51, by men with CIA credentials. I am skipping over numerous details here, but Wilson would travel to the 30th floor of the underground facility at S4, where he witnessed 8 different kinds of non-human craft, as well as an extremely tall woman that appeared to be an extraterrestrial. According to Wilson, S4 operated to test anti-gravity and reverse-engineered vehicles. The first successful flight, according to Wilson, had allegedly occurred on 18 July 1971, just a year before his station, which saw Admiral Bobby Ray Inman present for the test. After some time at S4, Wilson would claim to head Project Pounce, an elite Air Force/National Reconnaissance Organization Special Forces unit which retrieved downed UFOs. Pounce was allegedly quite successful and still ongoing as of 1996. Pounce operated as a full-spectrum UFO recovery operation, even providing cover stories for UFO crash retrievals. And these included crashed experimental aircraft, mining, construction, etc. According to Wilson, Project Pounce included a team called Delta, which operated as an arm of the NRO trained and tasked with Pounce security. This is odd to me, as it sounds somewhat similar to what the first-hand witness I spoke of told me. This Delta NRO detachment, according to Wilson, deployed with a, quote, exotic-looking 6-foot-long, 1-foot diameter electromagnetic pulse cannon, mounted on a pedestal on the back of a military truck, end quote, that was called the Equalizer, that harnessed low-frequency pulsed extreme microwave energy to shoot down UFOs. I am absolutely not sold on truck-mounted surface-to-air EMP weaponry. However, I have in the past talked a great deal about Ronald Reagan's 1983 Strategic Defense Initiative, aka the Star Wars program, which of course we spoke about earlier. And again, Star Wars was a proposed missile defense system intended to protect the United States from attack by Soviet ballistic missiles. And again, particularly in my project on SAIC, I did indeed discuss how I wager this SDI saw black budget, clandestine, highly compartmentalized secondary missions that harness the particle beam and lethality and target hardening programs of SDI to offensively target UFOs with microwave or X-ray weaponry. However, what is intriguing here is the corporation Wilson named that created this quote-unquote equalizer for the NRO retrieval teams. Ling Temco Vought, or LTV Electrosystems for short, was a large American conglomerate involved in aerospace, airlines, electronics, and more that ran from 1961 to 2001. The founding date of LTV is actually pretty intriguing to me, as I have directly drawn parallels to the establishment of institutions such as the Aerospace Corporation FFRDC and MITRE FFRDC between 1959 to 1961, to the timeframe Colonel Philip J. Corso claimed, recovered UFO materials were handed to contractors to exploit, all to bolster the US war machine. What actually gives me pause to really evaluate this statement by Wilson is actually the evolution of LTV systems itself. On this channel, I talk often about acquisitions by defense contractors, such as the merger of Lockheed and Martin Marietta, Northrop's acquisition of TRW, BDM, and Teledyne Ryan, EG&G's evolution into Amentum, and so on. In the 1970s, LTV changed its name to E-Systems. E-Systems was actually labeled by the Washington Post as, quote, part of the central nervous system for the nation's intelligence community, end quote. E-Systems was a critical contractor for the CIA, NSA, and with their spy satellite IMINT expertise, the NRO. E-Systems was even named in the 1970s by the New York Times as a quote-unquote CIA front company. Eventually, in 1995, Raytheon acquired E-Systems, and the former LTV was renamed as Raytheon Intelligence and Information Systems. Raytheon, of course, is an American prime defense contractor and a corporation I believe is absolutely massive in UFO legacy programs. So while we cannot definitively prove LTV Electro-Optics constructed this quote-unquote equalizer, their corporate evolution is identical to similar patterns I have covered on this channel. Now, let's step back, because I know what you're thinking. The NRO, as claimed by Wilson, is not the National Reconnaissance Organization as listed in his disclosures. It's the National Reconnaissance Office. I actually think this misnaming can either greatly strengthen or weaken Wilson's claims, and I do not think this is as simple as Boyland sloppily misprinting Wilson's statements. The National Reconnaissance Organization naming convention can actually be found in quite a few declassified CIA documents from the 1960s under then CIA Director John A. McCone. Indeed, if Wilson did in fact join NRO's Project Pounce in the early 1970s after his time at S4, perhaps such a naming convention as bizarre as National Reconnaissance Organization was still used at that time. Also, I highly recommend looking into McCone, who also served on the chair of the Atomic Energy Commission under Eisenhower and helped found Bechtel-McCone. But also, recall how earlier in this project, I mentioned that although the NRO was officially declassified in 1992, several leaks made their way to the papers regarding the agency in the early to mid-1970s. Well, specifically in 1976, numerous papers across the continental United States began publishing discussion of a National Reconnaissance Organization. So with Wilson and this bizarre NRO naming convention, I see two possible avenues here. Either Wilson was accustomed to agency circles talking about the National Reconnaissance Organization, or he was so poorly versed in US intelligence he only had this false naming convention for the NRO in his lexicon, and this was from papers he read in the 1970s and onward. There are, however, a few standout items from Wilson's disclosures that are intriguing and well worth mentioning. For one, Wilson named the Jason Society as a secret organization formed under President Eisenhower tasked with finding the truth of the quote-unquote alien question. The Jason Advisory Group is very real and, in my opinion, directly connected to UFO legacy programs. Jason officially exists as an independent group of elite scientists who advise the US on sensitive science and technology matters. Jason was established in 1960 with between 30 and 60 members, and from the group's founding to today, Jason's activities are run through the MITRE Corporation. If somehow you have never watched a single project of mine, MITRE is a federally funded research and development center I believe is absolutely paramount to UFO legacy programs, on an equal level to DOE/NNSA national labs like Sandia, Lawrence Livermore, and Los Alamos. Jason through MITRE works closely with the US DoD, Department of Energy, the National Nuclear Security Administration, the US intelligence community, and more. See on screen now a list of just some of the still classified and declassified Jason Defense Advisory Panel reports. And yes, Jason has performed plenty of work for the NRO, so it's interesting to see Jason mentioned by Wilson. Equally, if not more interesting here in Wilson's disclosures, is the reality of this alleged Project Pounce. One Project Pounce was actually discussed within the Robertson panel, a 1953 panel constructed specifically to debunk and reduce public concern regarding UFOs. The Robertson panel, in my opinion, stands amongst similar reports/panels/groups that have been instrumental in the 80-plus year USG-sponsored UFO disinformation campaign that also includes the Roswell cover-up, the Condon Committee, and AARO.
You can say categorically you've seen no convincing, confirmable evidence of intact spacecraft kept by the U.S. government?
No. I have seen nothing that leads me to that conclusion.
Is it possible there is some secret program that you're just not aware of?
I don't think so. I have access to anything and everything I need.
From the Robertson panel, we can see evidence presented from 14 to 17 January 1973. Entries here include Projects Grudge and Blue Book, Project Stork, which was Battelle Memorial Institute's parallel investigation into UFOs set apart from Blue Book, Project Twinkle at Sandia Base, as well as, quote, outline of investigation of UFOs proposed by Kirtland Air Force Base, Project Pounce, end quote. Intriguingly, we can put some pieces together and learn more about this outlined Project Pounce by reading Director of Project Grudge and Blue Book, Edward J. Ruppelt's 1956 book titled, quote, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, end quote. And here we can find some very, very, very important clues regarding this proposed Pounce. Pounce was proposed by Air Force Brigadier General, then Colonel William A. Matheny. Doing a little digging, we can reason Project Pounce was proposed by Matheny shortly after 2 August 1952. When Colonel Matheny, current commander of the 45th Air Defense Division, commented on saucer maneuvers over Albuquerque, New Mexico and Kirtland Air Force Base. Matheny presented a plan to harness several F-94C interceptors for this specific purpose of photographing UFOs. Quote, the flight that he proposed would be an operational unit with 6 aircraft. 2 would be on constant alert. The F-94Cs, then the hottest operational jet we had, would be stripped of all combat gear to give them peak performance, and they would carry a special camera in the nose. The squadrons would be located at places in the United States where UFOs were most frequently seen, end quote. This plan was taken very seriously, but eventually shelved, not because it was crazy, but because High Command decided 12 F-94Cs could not be spared. Essentially, Project Pounce would have originated from the Air Force for the specific purpose of IMINT, or Imagery Intelligence of UFOs. The exact kind of tasked mission that would be handled by IMINT specialist the NRO that would be founded just 9 years later. Possibly, Project Pounce was re-established in the 1960s, with the NRO and their Corona IMINT satellites or possibly SIGINT data acquisition methods. Yet, in the framework of Wilson's disclosures, it is still unclear how such a proposal could have evolved into a direct crash retrieval task force. Unless this alleged established Project Pounce served as a siloed NRO program under which all retrieval operations were conducted. Similar to how the Reddit OGA individual claimed his crew chief stated Tier 1 parallel retrieval assets operated under their own siloed authority. There is a final point I'd like to address that ties into Wilson and his alleged disclosures. Earlier in this video, I brought forth the idea that the National Reconnaissance Office would likely serve as a vanguard agency within the US DoD/IC to employ successfully leveraged derivative technologies or copycat technical vehicles, sometimes known as alien reproduction vehicles.
A male staff member in Congressman Brown's office not only confirmed the exhibit, but the fact that there were 3 discs at that exhibit. These discs were hovering off the floor without any visible means of support. They were referred to as alien reproduction vehicles, also nicknamed the flux liner because they used high voltage electricity.
The National Reconnaissance Office inherently serves as the US's eyes and ears in space. a critical support agency within both the U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community, responsible for several space-based intelligence gathering mechanisms imperative to U.S. national security. The NRO was founded upon the need for the U.S. to access denied airspaces to perform intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance of adversarial, specifically Soviet nuclear capabilities. Therefore, during the Cold War up to today, accurate assessments of adversarial nuclear and militaristic capabilities have become almost as near paramount to the U.S. as its own offensive nuclear capabilities. This also proposed a unique new challenge for the U.S., the need to counter Soviet ISR capabilities. This emerging need to hide from Soviet ISR can actually explain the numerous deep underground military bases across the continental United States. The logic here to place sensitive black sites dealing with advanced and possibly exotic projects underground to protect from both insider and outsider threats is indeed sound. Perfect examples here are the Lockheed Hellendale and Northrop Tejon radar cross-section facilities that exist primarily underground that were built to protect from Soviet and likely American eyes. Recall the words of David Grusch regarding the reason behind the secrecy for UFO legacy program operations: feudalistic dominance and asymmetrical warfare advantages.
So the reason for the secrecy exactly is what?
Feudalistic dominance, who can have both asymmetric technology for, it seems like, just fueling the war machine.
Grusch has disturbingly even stated there is a new secret Cold War between the US and its adversaries, likely Russia and China, to fully master non-human technology and adapt such technical vehicle and technology platforms for full-spectrum warfare and warfighter dominance.
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this, and it's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long, and there is no good way to level the playing field and hold other nation states accountable if they're doing unethical or illicit activity as it relates to this subject. And I think the obtuse secrecy is actually putting us in a very dangerous position where a country might make a breakthrough, let's say it's an adversary of ours, and it is so destabilizing.
You say there's been a Cold War behind the scenes with Russia and China.
There has been a Cold War with our peer adversaries, yeah.
It is from these statements from Grusch, one could intelligently infer that derivative technologies or alien reproduction vehicles are either likely still in an RDT&E stage or only deployed strategically, rarely, under strict circumstances and by approved agencies with strict need to harness such technologies. If indeed, which I believe this is true, there is a new Cold War to master non-human technologies for full-spectrum dominance. I mean, just look at the Immaculate Constellation documents regarding adversarial equilateral triangles observed over Indo-PACOM. That equally important to adapting technologies of unknown origin for human use is the need for ISR of our adversarial's capabilities. Sure, Immaculate Constellation and Sentient seem like incredibly valuable platforms to continue the mission of NRO and observe and listen from space, but that's about it, data acquisition only. What about a UFO crash retrieval in a denied region that legacy programs want to secure before an adversarial or foreign nation without a legacy program retrieves the craft? What about the possibility of performing ISR from a vehicle with no radar, visual, electronics, etc. signature that can loiter literally hundreds of feet from a high-value target or site? What if legacy programs wish to install their own NRO satellite network or space-based comms relay that features no signature from launching or piggybacking from terrestrial rocketry? What about vehicles with astonishing acceleration and deceleration capabilities that can travel at incomprehensible speeds and operate in atmosphere, microgravity, or underwater with an indefinite loiter time? Well, my friends, such operations would be conducted directly alongside or directly under the NRO as a support agency. And such operations would employ extremely advanced and exotic aerospace platforms, likely, in my opinion, employing derivative technologies or full-on ARV. I think back to the words of Master Sergeant Edgar Fouché, who in 1998 disclosed his knowledge of the alien reproduction vehicle TR-3B.
My name is Edgar Rochelle Fouché. I'm here to speak about secret government technology, reverse engineering of alien artifacts. The circular plasma field accelerator ring, called the magnetic field disruptor, surrounds a rotatable crew compartment. It's far ahead of anything you've ever imagined as far as technology. Sandia and Livermore Laboratories developed a reverse engineered MFD, and I believe the government will go at any lengths to protect this technology.
Once again, Fouché provided no direct evidence for TR-3B, but his testimony, as always, is fruitful and actionable to explore. And I will be quite plain here. Whether it's called TR-3B or the vehicle goes by another name, I strongly believe there is either a full-scale triangular alien reproduction vehicle or triangular airframe employing derivative systems from non-human technical vehicles. These vehicles likely exist in multiple models, ranging from triangles near 200 to 600 feet, and are constructed as black, almost van-to-black, equilateral triangles with rounded edges, a light at the center bottom and one light under each triangle vertex. I have devoted an entire investigation into studying TR-3B and triangular ARV in general, so I strongly recommend watching this video and also watching my investigation into Roderick Castle, who I believe encountered such a vehicle during the 1997 Hunter Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment. Fouché would intriguingly discuss much of the design history of TR-3B. Allegedly, prototyping of TR-3B began in the 1970s, and in the early 1970s, the first gravity warping triangle was flown. This interestingly comports with the claims of Wilson, who states Bobby Ray Inman was present for a similar demonstration. The TR-3B program supposedly consisted of several 250-foot prototype models pre-1994 and a 600-foot operational model post-1994. Pilots of these craft allegedly hailed from the Naval Test Pilot School at Patuxent River and the Edwards Air Force Test Pilot School out of the Edwards 412th Test Wing. This second point I agree with very strongly and would recommend watching my video on Witness Ed, an electronics warfare group director at the Edwards 412th Test Wing who claimed a joint ARV testing program exists between Edwards and the Nevada Test and Training Range, where Ed claimed he served as a strategic debriefer between scientists, technicians, and contractors to ARV pilots. Fouché would additionally state R&D of the craft was kept hyper-compartmentalized, but the primary contractors were Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, and Teledyne Ryan. And the TR-3B program was managed by the NRO, NSA, and CIA. Indeed, Fouché would state these three same agencies, NRO, NSA, and CIA, were actually the USG agencies responsible for operating the TR-3B. This billion-dollar in 1990 vehicle harnessed its MFD propulsion system not to operate anti-gravity principles, but to warp gravity, generating a field that reduced the TR-3B's total mass by 89%. Such incredible propulsion systems, allegedly reverse-engineered by Sandia and Lawrence Livermore, allowed TR-3B to perform incredible feats. These included seemingly instantaneous acceleration and deceleration, flight at multiple times the speed of sound without any sort of sonic boom, and operational capabilities in trans-medium environments. Fouché claimed no knowledge of any weapon systems on board TR-3B, if indeed the craft did employ such systems. However, Fouché did state the vehicle employed extremely advanced signature management capabilities. Outside of numerous ECCM systems, TR-3B employed electrochromatic coding to change color and render the craft invisible. This specific point is both very fascinating and very important to me. I understand that signature management, specifically electro-optic cloaking capabilities, are one of the crown jewel capabilities U.S. legacy programs have historically sought to adapt from non-human vehicles to U.S. air, ground, and sea platforms. With full-spectrum signature management rendering the craft invisible to any detection system, TR-3B would easily be able to infiltrate any denied airspace halfway across the world within seconds to minutes, deliver or collect a direct action team to an LZ, or perform ISR on high-value targets within literal earshot. Indeed, I'm reminded of the testimony of Dylan Borland, who stated under oath he observed a 100-foot black triangle above him while stationed at Langley Air Force Base that seemingly originated from the nearby NASA hangar at Langley.
Mr. Borland, in your testimony, you described witnessing large triangular craft while stationed at Langley Air Force Base in 2012. Can you explain what you observed in terms of size, behavior, and why you're confident it was not conventional technology?
Great question, ma'am. So on the base, I lived in the barracks. There was a little smoke pit outside. I was there on the telephone and looking across to the flight line, and I see a white light pop up and stop about 100 feet in the air. I thought it was a weather balloon. I've seen tests from there before, weeknight, normal thing, not surprising. I actually finished my cigarette and I began walking up towards the flight line. There is a track, and because I was on 3 months of night work, I would walk the track at night when we were weathered down. And as I began walking towards the light, towards the flight line and the track, the light then flies across the base, across the flight line, and as it flies to me, a triangle manifests around the light. I can't tell you if it's active camouflage. I can't tell you if it appeared around the light, but I can tell you that it was a white light, and then it was a triangle. It stopped about 100 feet in front of me and approximately 100 feet above me. My telephone got extremely hot, completely froze, dead. I remember how thick it was. It was between 1 to 2 stories thick, equilateral triangle. I could never see the top of it, and the edges were 90 degrees. There were 4 lights in total, 1 light on each corner and a larger light in the center, 2 to 3 times the size of the corner lights. But what was really odd was the outside. The best way to describe it is like looking at a James Webb telescope picture where you have the colors and then the black background. So the craft itself was this black metallic flake paint, but on top of the craft was this gold, lava, plasma, some type of fluid going over and around the craft. I'm under this for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then the center light flashes 2 to 3 times, no sound, immediately shoots up to commercial jet level minimum, in my opinion, and I immediately feel static electricity all over my body, and then I smell the smell of after a thunderstorm or lightning storm, that really strong summer thunderstorm smell.
Borland intriguingly states that the triangle quote-unquote appeared around the light, and he wasn't sure what this mechanism was, though he guessed it was some sort of active camouflage. Indeed, I believe the lava-esque bizarre flowing surface above the black metallic flight paint of the vehicle was a byproduct of such an active camouflage or electro-optic cloaking system. Bizarrely, and an almost contradictory point to this statement about the triangle featuring black flight paint and seemingly originating from a hangar at Langley, Borland gave an interesting answer when asked about the origin of this triangle.
And do you think that, in your opinion, that the equilateral triangle was the U.S. government's technology?
I did once upon a time, but knowing what I know now, I'll have to answer that question in a skiff probably.
Well, my next question is, you teased us, so knowing what you know now means what?
I know enough to know that if you want an answer to that question, go to Arrow. They have the answer.
Do you think it was a foreign government?
I do not, no.
Notice that Borland was asked about the technology, not the airframe itself. In fact, I strongly believe the triangle Borland observed is a human-constructed airframe, likely inspired by or harnessing non-human propulsion, lift, or flight principles. But this electro-optic cloaking system was indeed a technology derived from non-human intelligence. Just think about this flowing lava-like glow as a seeming field wrapped around the vehicle. Such a detail reminds me quite closely of the UFO crash retrieval observed by the aforementioned Lance Corporal Jonathan Weygand in Peru in 1997. According to Weygand, this large, egg-shaped craft seemingly had a field encompassing the craft's skin. This field was a shimmering and brilliant green and purple, similar to the mother-of-pearl effect. Perhaps such a field on the craft was utilized for cloaking purposes when the craft was operational. The question then is, did Borland observe TR-3B, or a similar triangular airframe, possibly an ARV, that reverse-engineered and adapted electro-optic cloaking systems from UFO crash retrievals? A similar system to that observed by Jonathan Weygand for the purpose of ISR. And was this craft operated at the behest of CIA, NSA, and NRO? Well, I certainly believe there are strong arguments to suggest so. And this brings me all the way back to the testimony of Colonel Steve Wilson. Although Wilson's testimony is leagues below the credibility of Grusch or Borland and far less credible than the testimony of Master Sergeant Edgar Fouché, Wilson would additionally make intriguing claims of reverse-engineered technologies of unknown origin operated by the NRO. Wilson claimed Teledyne Ryan, the same contractor Fouché accused of working on TR-3B, a contractor purchased by Northrop Grumman, and a contractor I highly suspect was involved in UFO legacy program operations, built an anti-gravity vehicle based off recovered exotic technologies called the XH-7D, aka the XH Shark. According to Wilson, these anti-gravity helicopters were assigned to the NRO and their Direct Action Team Delta for UFO crash retrieval operations. Though there is no outright evidence or corroborating testimony I can find regarding the existence of the XH Shark, Wilson's testimony serves as an interesting footnote into possible harnessing of exotic technologies and vehicles by the National Reconnaissance Office. On this channel, I spend a significant amount of time exploring security mechanisms, program protection strategies, classification controls, key milestones, and alleged gatekeepers that have largely successfully kept strict secrecy surrounding UFO legacy programs, and allowed such programs to remain hidden within the deepest recesses of American special access, unacknowledged special access, and controlled access programs, to thrive recovering and exploiting non-human technologies unchallenged. Such program protection strategies I have spoken about before include the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency Security and Intelligence Directive, or SID. Along with the DARPA MSO, or Mission Support Office, SID works to ensure protection of DARPA's high-risk R&D programs that involve highly sensitive technologies critical to U.S. national security. The SID safeguards against insider threats, foreign influence, espionage, and a wide swath of protection protocols, all to ensure U.S. technological dominance while safeguarding DARPA's primary mission of, quote, creating technological surprise for U.S. national security, end quote, by applying, quote, risk-managed, proactive program protection and related services, end quote. I personally fear DARPA SID greatly and recognize this directorate as an office not afraid to employ wet works to silence insider or outsider threats to exotic RDT&E programs. I have also discussed many individuals I strongly wager have served as gatekeepers to UFO legacy programs, aka individuals who gaslight the public/Congress on the reality of a non-human presence on this planet.
And everything that has been brought to our attention and everything that was brought to my attention when I was in that position as the director, we investigated and discovered that it did not come from where they thought it came from. Most everything was explainable through other documentation, other programs, other people that had talked to other people.
Or individuals that hold the proverbial keys to the DUMBs or locations housing recovered vehicles and derivative technologies.
Couple of things. As you heard, I spent a career working in national security in the tech field. But in that space, I worked from government-funded research, independent research, homegrown technology within the national security community, partnerships with industry, partnerships with startups, partnerships internationally across all those same areas in order to ensure that the components that we needed, the capabilities that we needed were being developed and then integrated to do things that most people didn't know we could do. And I've had the great blessing and privilege to be part of groups over my career that achieved things that most people didn't think were possible. I often said at CIA, we did the stuff Hollywood only dreamed about.
These include the disgraced former head of AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who during his time with AARO contracted SandCorp, a company specializing in insider threat mitigation and plugging whistleblower leaks. Sure, equally disgraced ex-AARO Deputy Director Tim Phillips attempted to claim SandCorp connected AARO to various subject matter experts. But with Phillips' history of exaggeration, emotional lashouts on LinkedIn, and whoppers, can he really be trusted here? I spoke of Kirkpatrick and many individuals I identified as UFO Legacy Program gatekeepers in my SAIC project and discussed shared commonalities behind credentialed DoD/IC personnel such as Kirkpatrick, Donald M. Kerr, William J. Perry, and much more. And the shared commonality here, well, of course, SAIC. I made such comparisons in relation to the ever-infamous Wilson Davis Notes, the Special Access Program Oversight Committee Senior Review Group, or SAPOC-SRG, shared high-level employment at institutions, agencies, and organizations I highly wager are involved in UFO programs. Well, I intend to do the exact same today. I will investigate Kirkpatrick, Kerr, Perry, and many more once again. But this time from a new lens with new major and minor connective tissue. That minor connective tissue being the Office of the Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition and Technology, or the Office of the Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment as it's called today, as well as the CIA's Office of Global Access. And major tissue, well, of course, the topic of today, the National Reconnaissance Office. Because I firmly believe the NRO is indeed a UFO Legacy Program administrator that runs numerous siloed programs, and thus employs numerous gatekeepers, program protection strategies, and possible footprints. Like I do in every single one of my videos, let's revisit the Wilson Davis Notes, an alleged memo recounting the greatest instance of a senior United States flag officer and intelligence official being gatekept from accessing the UFO Legacy Program portfolio. As I do in most of my projects these days, I will assume the viewer has some, if not full, familiarity with the Wilson Davis Notes. After all, of course, covering this memo was my first ever video on this channel. Regardless of the drama I have seemingly shared with Davis on social media, and regardless of a growing hypothesis Davis is actively performing program protection strategies, when he states humans have never constructed alien reproduction vehicles or had any sort of breakthroughs with derivative technologies. I still fully believe the fundamental facts of this memo regarding a 2002 EG&G Nevada parking lot conversation between Dr. Eric Davis and Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson are fundamentally correct. These facts in question: Wilson attempting to access UFO Legacy programs, but regardless of his cleared status and high-level position within the U.S. intelligence community, Wilson was stonewalled in accessing such programs by elements of the U.S. Executive Branch and Special Access Program Oversight Committee. In short, these disputed but highly likely accurate notes transcribed by Dr. Eric Davis leaked from the estate of the late astronaut Edgar Mitchell. These notes fully recount a 2002 meeting between Davis and Vice Admiral and former DIA Director Thomas Wilson outside of the parking lot of contractor EG&G. The conversation recounts Wilson finding, but being stonewalled in accessing UFO recovery and material exploitation programs. These programs were allegedly protected by the DoD Special Access Program Oversight Committee SAPOC's Senior Review Group SRG, and a large defense contractor Wilson refused to name.
According to Wilson, he spoke to 2 permanent Special Access Program Oversight Committee members, Brigadier General Mike Kostelnick and Paul Kaminsky, the sitting Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition and Technology in 1997, that was preceded by John M. Deutsch, and I will actually refer to this office as the OUSDAT from here on out, where Wilson was informed by General Michael Ward to search a special records group of the OUSDAT belonging to Special Legacy Holdover Programs from before Special Access Program restructuring efforts in the early 1990s. Within the memo, UFO legacy programs were reorganized under the SAPOC SRG after an internal audit almost revealed the programs. This reorganization of SAPOC began on 5 January 1994, when the Deputy Secretary of Defense William J. Perry significantly enhanced changes in the DoD Special Access Program, or SAP, management and control structures. This newsletter on screen now highlights those changes, establishing the Senior Review Group. Indeed, according to Wilson, then Undersecretary of Defense and future Secretary of Defense himself, William J. Perry, alongside Paul Kaminsky of SAPOC SRG and OUSDAT, Mike Kostelnick of SAPOC SRG, and General Michael Ward all suggested that Wilson investigate a special subset of unacknowledged/carve-out/waived programs, set apart from, yet buried by, conventional SAPs that held the UFO portfolio, and that the OUSDAT would hold some clues and records. Wilson would eventually get in contact with the quote-unquote Watch Committee, the tip of the spear of legacy program gatekeeping, consisting of a security director retired from the NSA with expertise in counterintelligence, as well as a program director and a corporate attorney. Wilson allegedly attempted to force a read-in into the programs after telling the Watch Committee he read their program record in the OUSDAT Special Records Group, and leveraged his position as Deputy Director for the Defense Intelligence Agency and Assistant Joint Chief of Staff for J2. Wilson allegedly engaged in an in-person meeting with the Watch Committee, but was still denied read-in access. The committee claimed that Wilson's regulatory and statutory authority as DIA Deputy Director was not relevant or pertinent to the nature of their programs. The Watch Committee did, however, show Wilson the bigot list of individuals read into the programs dated 1990 and updated in 1993. A bigot list is, of course, an internal security document listing personnel with the highest level clearance for a specific operation or sensitive information. Though he wouldn't reveal the names to Davis, Wilson recognized many of the names on the bigot list as individuals in the OUSDAT. And if you haven't guessed by now, the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology is an absolutely critical piece to this puzzle. After all, according to the memo, this office held numerous records to UFO legacy programs, and the office housed myriad individuals read into the programs. The OUSDAT also connects strongly to, of course, the NRO. And discussion of that connection will lead into our discussion of gatekeepers. But first, I do quickly want to step back. In several projects of mine, I have attempted to investigate what internal audit nearly exposed the UFO legacy program portfolio that led to SAPOC SRG receiving extended oversight to serve as a gatekeeping structure to keep even cleared individuals like Wilson far from technologies of unknown origin-focused programs. I have volunteered a few theories here for this defensive reaction by the legacy programs. In the SAIC project, I explored a theory that the need for UFO legacy program operations to restructure the Special Access Program Oversight Committee to avoid any further instances of exposure through audits arose from a General Accounting Office May 1993 report titled, quote, DoD Special Access Programs Administrative Due Process Not Provided When Access is Denied or Revoked, end quote, which discusses the Navy and Air Force not complying with DoD Regulation 6200.2-R, which discussed Special Access Program access. Interestingly enough, the Army did comply in some cases, according to this GAO report. According to some of my research, this actually makes sense to me. as I am familiar with cases in which the U.S. Army seemed to operate UFO material exploitation programs in a strict and controlled environment with oversight, while Navy and Air Force legacy programs seem to somewhat operate far more loosely. And then in the Lockheed project, I explored an August 1993 GAO report to the U.S. Secretary of Defense titled, quote, "Need for DoD inspections of special access contracts," end quote. This report detailed GAO investigations into critical missteps in carve-out program security protocols. Specifically, poor document control systems over classified special access documents at the Lockheed Corporation's Burbank plant dating back to 1986. I theorized this GAO investigation into thousands of instances of poor document control and sometimes unauthorized document destruction at 53 document control substations, nearly exposed Lockheed's legacy program operations. I highly recommend watching these two projects to learn more, but I would now like to propose an additional possible nexus or supplemental incident for this reactionary defense by legacy. In 1994, a financial investigation and audit was leveraged at the NRO, resulting in a high-profile 10 August 1994 hearing spearheaded primarily by Senate Select Committee on Intelligence member and Nevada State Senator Richard H. Bryan. Oversight efforts, including audits and investigations, targeted the NRO because of bizarre financial discrepancies in the intelligence office disclosed to the public just a few years prior. SSCI was particularly concerned with the NRO's plans to build a new million-square-foot headquarters in Northern Virginia. This headquarters costs were not reported to Congress and somehow rose from $168 million to $350 million. Senator Bryan would state that these costs were, quote, "deliberately hidden from the public," end quote. Hilariously, though, the NRO would make some comments on this valid concern of egregious cost discrepancies in its July 2015 edition of, quote, "National Reconnaissance, Journal of the Discipline and Practice," end quote, and sound kind of like a scorned lover. Within the journal, NRO discussed the SSCI investigation, but began with a quote from Senator Bryan complimenting the NRO, quote, "The NRO acknowledged Senator Bryan during the same hearing had done, quote, an extraordinarily effective job in terms of its national defense mission," end quotes. NRO then sheepishly claimed it was, quote, "being taken to task by Congress, particularly SSCI, for constructing a headquarters building many considered too large and lavish for a government agency, but more specifically, for allegedly not obtaining the proper authorizations before beginning the project," end quote. However, these headquarters were just the impetus for congressional oversight efforts through investigation and audits of NRO. Beginning with the NRO's official declassification by Sitting Director Martin C. Faye in 1992, who we will discuss again soon, 2 years before William J. Perry's reorganization of SAPOC and strengthening of the SRG, which allegedly fortified UFO legacy program gatekeeping structures, SSCI had begun auditing the once classified agency's financials. The true disturbing revelations of the NRO's grievous misappropriation of funds came to light in 1995, when Senator Bryan attempted to launch a massive, comprehensive, and complete audit of the NRO by the General Accounting Office, as well as implementing safeguards forcing the NRO budget to be subject to full review of the Office of Management and Budget. Bryan publicly accused the NRO of quote-unquote rampant mismanagement in regards to excessive quote-unquote forward funding. Forward funding, aka carryover appropriations, are unobligated or unspent funds, quote-unquote left over, from a previous budget period that are carried forward and used in future budget periods to cover costs for the same or other projects. Essentially, instead of letting leftover budget lapse at the end of a fiscal year, without authorization, the NRO took these leftover funds to fund projects in the next fiscal year. Full transparency here, I've spoken to individuals named in the EWD memo that have told me carryover appropriations have indeed been used to fund UFO legacy program operations.
which gave me pause to reflect and consider this NRO financial scandal as a possible source for the SAPOC SRG reorganization. Also, recall David Grusch famously discussed misappropriation of funds being utilized to supply UFO legacy program operations with capital.
Well, so then how does, I don't want to cut you off, but how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
Does that mean
self-fund.
that there is money in the budget that is set to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Initial surveys and assessments of NRO carryover appropriations in 1995 estimated $1.7 billion, but quickly rose to better estimates of $3.7 billion. The NRO was unable to provide a single firm estimate of the total carryover funds, and journalists reported the NRO demonstrated a, quote, complete collapse of accountability, end quote. Okay, now of course I remember the SAPOC reorganization occurred in January of 1994, and this public congressional investigation and audit into NRO began August 1994 and climaxed in September of 1995. So the timelines here don't really add up, right? Well, remember, SSCI investigations into NRO funds and thus carryover appropriations actually began in 1992, 2 years before William J. Perry's reorganization of SAPOC. So it stands to reason this 1992 congressional effort could have indeed seen reactionary defensive efforts by UFO legacy programs that rendered the clandestine operations safe under the SAPOC SRG by the time this NRO financial scandal hit the public spotlight. But still, I think there are even more arguments to make here, such as the NRO Director Harris and Deputy Director Hill being forced to resign in 1995 by sitting Director of Central Intelligence John M. Deutsch, who claimed he was, quote, unaware of the surplus, end quote. John M. Deutsch was the immediate successor to William J. Perry as the 24th U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense. Remember, under Perry's SAPOC reform, the DepSecDef operated at the chair of the SAPOC Senior Review Group, meaning from 11 March 1994 to 10 May 1995, Deutsch operated as the DepSecDef and chair of the Special Access Program Oversight Committee. Immediately after this position, Deutsch moved to DCI, or Director of Central Intelligence, where within 6 months, he fired the NRO director and deputy director for these financial scandals. Now, is there a possible conflict of interest here? I would wager that yes, especially as prior to his position as DepSecDef in charge of SAPOC, Deutsch served within the OUSDAT as the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology, and he served this role during the time period that Perry allegedly strengthened UFO legacy program gatekeeping structures. And remember, this OUSDAT was allegedly the office through which Admiral Thomas Wilson found UFO legacy program personnel and records. And of course, we will expand on this in just a minute. And to the surprise of likely nobody here, William J. Perry himself served within the NRO from 1955 to 1997, where he even chaired the Perry panel that advised NRO Program B on all overhead SIGINT collection systems. Program B had its ground station at the mysterious Pine Gap, Australia, and we will tie this in together to other UFO legacy program gatekeepers here soon. And I do want to briefly analyze possible fallout from this NRO financial scandal and auditing kerfuffle. Modern day, the NRO is actually exempt from the DoD and Financial Improvement Audit Readiness (FIRE) requirements as outlined under Section 509 of the fiscal year 2014 Intelligence Authorization Act. However, quite comically here, since 2009, the NRO has voluntarily maintained its own quote-unquote independent audit. We can observe a hilarious recent example of the NRO publishing a paper to congratulate itself on its 16th consecutive clean audit. I wonder if these self-audits are indeed transparent and hold the NRO accountable. Okay, so the OUSDAT, or again, the Office of the Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition and Technology, an alleged admin-level component to UFO legacy programs,
an assistant to the Secretary of Defense, which is part of the executive branch as head of the DoD. This rabbit hole goes deep, but trust me that there are numerous individuals I have and will accuse as legacy program gatekeepers that have ties to the NRO, the OUSDAT, and the OUSDAT's intelligence community counterpart, the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Acquisition, Technology, and Facilities, or as I will call it, the DDNI-ATNF. Now, stick with me here as we get through some tricky acronyms and naming evolutions. The OUSDAT began as the USDA, aka the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition in 1986. Transitioned to the OUSDAT or USDAT during the 1994 SAPOC reorganization, and was renamed once again to the USD-ATNL, aka the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics in 2000, and again renamed to the USD-ANS, aka the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment from 2017 to present. We have already talked about Paul Kaminsky, permanent SAPOC member and successor to Deutsch as the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology. Remember that according to Wilson, Kaminsky had direct knowledge and access to UFO legacy program operations. Since 2017, Kaminsky has served on the board of the MITRE Corporation, and pay attention to that thread. Kaminsky was of course former NRO from 1971 to 1976, and quote, pioneered the development of a major NRO reconnaissance satellite system, end quote. As of 2007, Kaminsky also served on the NRO Technical Advisory Board. Now, recall if you will, one Ellen Lord, whom I spoke of in the SAIC project. Ellen Lord signed and established the Corporate Portfolio Program in the year of 2020. The Corporate Portfolio Program gives defense industrial base corporations access to DoD executives, scientists, FFRDCs, and management with broad access to Special Access Program portfolios. I have cited this Corporate Portfolio Program as a major milestone in UFO legacy program evolution, strengthening the bond between three critical elements to UFO legacy programs: admins, FFRDCs, and DIB contractors. Lord established the Corporate Portfolio Program while serving, of course, as the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, aka the former OUSDAT. So I did just mention the USDAT, OUSDAT, or USD-ANT, however you want to call its intelligence community counterpart, the DDNI-ATNF, or Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Acquisition, Technology, and Facilities. We can learn a lot of intriguing data from a 27 July 2016 GAO document titled, quote, Defense Space Acquisitions, Too Early to Determine If Recent Changes Will Resolve Persistent Fragmentation in Management and Oversight, end quote. We can learn here that the assistant to the DDNI-ATNF, along with the then USD-ATNL, which remember is now the USD-ANS and the former OUSDAT or USDAT, actually shared joint oversight over NRO acquisitions. Indeed, ADNI-ATNF, which is the assistant to the DDNI-ATNF, and its DoD counterparts, the then USD-ATNL, have joint milestone decision authority on wholly or majority National Intelligence Program-funded acquisition programs, and can delegate decision authority to the director of the NRO if applicable. So, if we found tremendous value in analyzing the USD-ANS, former OUSDAT, that has strong roots to the Wilson Davis notes in the NRO to reveal likely UFO legacy program gatekeepers, does it not stand to reason that we also analyze this office's IC counterpart, the DDNI-ATNF, that joint runs NRO acquisition programs with the current-day USD-ANS, former OUSDAT? Perhaps, just perhaps, these two offices within the DoD and IC have major authority in UFO legacy programs and deep roots to the NRO. Well, this is where things are about to get very strange. From what I understand, Mr. Doug Wolf is a true program loyalist whose defense of legacy program security rivals that of even members of the DARPA SID. If Wolf sounds familiar to you, I've spoken about Doug Wolf during his duties as Deputy Director for the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology. If you are new to my channel, CIA DS&T is an office I label with ultra-high conviction as a UFO Legacy Program Administrator. As Deputy Director for the DS&T, Wolf established in 2003 the CIA's Office of Global Access, or OGA. As we discussed earlier in this video, allegedly, the CIA OGA serves as a logistics coordinator for outside of CONUS UFO crash retrievals. Working closely with combat support agencies like the NGA and agencies like the NRO and NURO, as well as direct action teams parallel to Tier 1 units. These task forces allegedly secure and retrieve UFOs whilst mitigating threats through ISR and direct action. During his 33 years in the agency, Wolf also worked as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Acquisition, Technology, and Facilities. And if somehow that doesn't ring a bell, that is the DDNI-ATNF. Oh, and for 16 years, Wolf worked, quote, part of the CIA component in the National Reconnaissance Office, and was involved in the launch and operations of multiple satellite systems. He partnered with the aerospace industry to develop new technologies and innovative collection concepts. His last position at the NRO was as Director of Legislate Liaison, end quote. Well, this might just be coincidence. Wolf worked with 4 institutions, OGA, DS&T, NRO, and DDNI-ATNF, all 4 of which are allegedly involved in UFO legacy programs, so that has to be a coincidence, right? Well, what if we look at retired CIA Mark Moynihan? Moynihan served for decades in the agency, working his way from a simple career trainee with training in clandestine tradecraft and paramilitary operations, to blossoming as the Chief of Policy and Interim Chief of Staff for the CIA DS&T. Moynihan also, from 2000 to 2010, served as both the Director for the CIA's Office of Advanced Technologies and Programs, as well as the Director of the Office of Global Access, or OGA. But with Moynihan, we won't just stop there. Moynihan also served several positions within the NRO that ranged from Deputy Chief of Engineering to Chief Systems Engineer and Director of Policy for NRO Ground Enterprise Directorate. And let's not forget, in the early 2010s, Moynihan also served as the Assistant Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Acquisition, Technology, and Facilities, aka the Assistant to the DDNI-ATNF. So the boxes that Moynihan checks: DS&T, OGA, NRO, DDNI-ATNF. Now, what about one Dawn Meyerix as well? Meyerix began her career with TRW, a company bought by Northrop Grumman that I have directly implicated in the RDT&E of derivative technologies based on technologies of unknown origin. Indeed, Meyerix also served as CIA DS&T Deputy Director for 8 years, following her 3-year position as, of course, the Assistant Director of National Intelligence for Acquisition, Technology, and Facilities. Today, Meyerix serves as a corporate board member for MITRE, essentially a parallel track to Kaminsky. While she has no direct references in her CV to NRO or OGA, we can strongly assume she performed intimate work with both offices during her tenure under the ODNI as ADNI-ATNF and CIA DS&T. But she still checks many of our boxes here, including MITRE. And please enjoy this image of her with the ever unsavory Glenn Gaffney. There is a serious connection here with senior members of UFO legacy programs and the NRO, and the 2 channels that control oversight for NRO acquisition programs, the DDNI-ATNF and the USD-ANS, former OUSDAT. Intriguing lines of research here to pursue, but I am willing to bet with high confidence that critical legacy program personnel and gatekeepers reside in these offices under the executive branch that directly oversee support, the NRO, and direct action, the OGA and Tier 1, and logistics, the CIA DS&T, elements of UFO crash retrieval programs. But now, let's take some time to investigate even more gatekeepers and legacy program personnel with ties to NRO. Thus far, Kaminsky, Deutsch, Perry, Lord, Wolf, Moynihan, Meyerix have all been named, but of course we won't stop there. Disgraced ex-Aero director Sean Kirkpatrick. I have talked about this man ad nauseum, from his position as a senior scientist with SAIC, to him tucking tail and running to FFRDC Oak Ridge National Lab, as Chief Technology Officer for Defense and Intelligence Programs. Now, it may seem bizarre that Oak Ridge deleted this entry celebrating this new position for Kirkpatrick. However, it isn't surprising to me, as I have recently expounded on first-hand claims I have received of UFO legacy programs focused on the skin of recovered UFOs, being conducted under Oak Ridge and the Y-12 complex at large, administrated by the DOE OICI, or Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, and operated by MITRE and Battelle. I have said and maintain that Kirkpatrick was likely partially briefed or retroactively briefed into various aspects of UFO legacy program operations during his tenure at Aero, and tasked with aggressive counterintelligence and reactionary procedures that ultimately led to the steaming pile of traceable lies that is the Aero Historical Report Volume 1. The question here is, did the sweet and innocent Kirkpatrick have prior exposure to legacy program operations pre his position with Aero and Aero Historical Report? If he did, I would wager this occurred when he was poached for the DOE at a young age, OICI perhaps, when he served as a senior research scientist for SAIC and AFRL around the year 2000. Maybe when he joined the CIA and served as program manager assigned to the NRO from 2003 to 2005. Or possibly when he joined the CIA DS&T as a staff scientist from 2005 to 2007. Oh, and of course, as of 2025, Kirkpatrick's LLC Nonlinear Solutions is subcontracting under the MITRE Corporation for U.S. Spacecom. Again, MITRE has surfaced with Kirkpatrick, Kaminsky, Meyerix, and Will again. As a refresher, MITRE is a federally funded research and development center I believe is entwined with UFO legacy programs, above almost any other FFRDC institution, bar maybe Sandia and Los Alamos. I cannot stress enough the importance of gatekeepers with NRO connections also observing connections to MITRE. This connection is, in my opinion, as important as any connection between NRO and CIA OGA. So let's use that to turn our attention to a man whom I have mentioned numerous times, Donald Kerr. Kerr's resume is beyond incredible and exactly the type of CV a high-level legacy program member would possess. Kerr served as Executive Vice President and Director of SAIC, President and Director of EG&G, Director of Los Alamos, Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Deputy Director of CIA DS&T, MITRE Trustee, and Director of the NRO from 2005 to 2007. And speaking of MITRE, what about the 10th Director of the NRO, the man who actually declassified the NRO in 1992, Martin C. Faga? Faga joined the CIA/NRO under Program B as a simple engineer before rising to the position of director, and there as Program B again. Faga additionally operated various positions within MITRE as technical staff that strangely directly translated into agency work.
I got to the intelligence community a little indirectly. Left the Air Force, went to MITRE, got involved in ground sensors, the ground sensor program widely used in Vietnam. Started to meet CIA people who were doing some similar things, got to know some of them, thought this would be a really neat place to work. And then when I applied, because of my electro-optical background from the Air Force, was hired into the NRO side of CIA's Office of Development and Engineering. It was a great several years and the best engineering years of my career, by far.
So that Program B we keep discussing, Program B operated as a joint NRO/CIA program to build and operate satellites for SIGINT purposes. the ground element of the program was stationed at Pine Gap, Australia. Today, Pine Gap is jointly run by the Australian Defence Force, CIA, NSA, and NRO, and has served as the subject of numerous UFO legacy program discussions with its remote location and spook-run elements. The first chief of this NRO Program B facility at Pine Gap and director of Program B itself was a man named R. Evan Heinemann. Heinemann's name gets quite convoluted sometimes, so just bear with me while we simply refer to him as Heinemann. According to the NRO celebration of programs A, B, C, and D, Director Heinemann was, quote, one of the agency's most distinguished engineers, analysts, and weapons technologists. Mr. Heinemann introduced a system that combined collection and processing to produce world-class scientific and weapons intelligence, end quote. Outside of NRO Program B Director, Heinemann of course served as CIA DS&T Deputy Director. But why do I speak specifically of Heinemann?
I started out extremely skeptical about this whole thing. I thought this was just rubbish from the tabloids, but I was surprised to find thousands of U.S. government documents from intelligence agencies that tended to indicate that there was a little bit more to this than met the eye. So I went to seek guidance from the various highest levels of the United States intelligence community, and I was quite alarmed at what I was able to learn.
Now we are, in this report that we're now going to show, we're going to hear a conversation featuring you. Tell me the context of that conversation.
Well, I had contacted Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, who was the head of the National Security Agency in the United States, Deputy Director at CIA, Director of Naval Intelligence, and a variety of intelligence posts, a technologist, and clearly someone that if this was really accurate, that there really were UFOs and non-human intelligence around, this is a man who had to know. Mm-hmm. So I was able to contact him thanks to a contact through Admiral Lord Hill Norton here in the UK. And this conversation, he alarmingly not only indicated that these issues were covered under national secrecy laws, but that the United States government did in fact have possession of the hardware associated with this. In other words, this was an actual physical phenomenon. As
a craft, a spaceship.
Several of them, and they were in operational condition, which I assume suggested that they had been in contact, that they had been given these craft for some reason or another, because they certainly weren't crashed vehicles.
In a 1989 telephone call, Admiral Bobby Ray Inman would tell NASA mission specialist Bob Eschler that Deputy Director of CIA DS&T, Everett Heinemann, would be the quote-unquote best person to ask if recovered UFO vehicles would be available for technological research outside of military circles. Quote, the Deputy Director for Science and Technology at CIA is named Everett Heinemann. He is in fact getting ready to retire in the very near future. That may make him somewhat more willing to have dialogues than he otherwise would have had. When I knew him in the period 7 to 10 years ago, he was a person of very substantial integrity and just good common sense. So as a place to start, he would clearly be high on the list, end quote. And we actually have recorded snippets of this telephone call.
Do you anticipate that any of the recovered vehicles would ever become available for technological research outside of the military circles?
10 years ago, the answer would have been no.
Yeah.
Whether as time has evolved, they're beginning to become more open on it, is a possibility.
Heinemann and Eschler agreed to meet at the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia on 10 August 1989. In this meeting, Heinemann would deny any knowledge of UFOs or UFO legacy programs. However, in 2022, Twitter user RGH_UFOs would contact Heinemann regarding comments made by Inman that Heinemann was knowledgeable on US UFO programs. In this instance, Heinemann did not deny, but instead said, quote, I am a long way and quite a few years from working in the area you are researching, end quote. Heinemann would offer to answer any questions relating to UFOs, but never again responded to RGH. As of this time, I have additionally attempted to contact Heinemann to no response. And don't think I forgot about Bobby Ray Inman, a world-famous accused UFO legacy program gatekeeper. Inman's career in U.S. intelligence is second to none and quite frankly legendary. Board member of SAIC and Wackenhut Services, Inc., Deputy Director of CIA, Director of the NSA, 4-star Naval Admiral, Director of Naval Intelligence, and so much more. While Inman did not directly work with NRO in a registered position, Inman did direct the NURO, National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, which was created secretly in 1969 to consolidate reconnaissance efforts between the CIA and Navy and is still classified to this day. At least, shortly after its founding, NURO experienced an extreme tug-of-war of control between the CIA DS&T and the Navy.
Thank you. I became the Director of Naval Intelligence 13 September 1974, brand new flag selectee that year. I also had a second hat, and they still don't want me to talk about it even now, of Director of the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office. Sitting in highly classified, that's the organization that procured, built all of the sensitive reconnaissance systems to collect intelligence under the surface of the oceans.
It additionally appears that CIA Directorate of Science and Technology Deputy Director Glenn Gaffney, a rogues gallery member of this channel and likely agency individual behind the blockage of the Lockheed Martin OSAP Kona Blue PSAP, got his career started in the NRO's undersea counterpart, the NURO. One of NURO's first operations was in 1972, and again, go watch my Naval Programs project to learn more. And this mission saw recovery of the wreckage of Soviet submarine K-129 alongside an agency vessel called the Glomar Explorer.
And I've had the great blessing and privilege to be part of groups over my career that achieved things that most people didn't think were possible. I often said at CIA, we did the stuff Hollywood only dreamed about. My first interaction with deep sea mining was a cover operation for the Glomar Explorer, which was a ship that pulled a then Soviet submarine off the sea floor in broad daylight with no one knowing what we were doing. That's kind of cool. And just thinking about the forces that had to be managed and designed to actually handle all of that, sea state and the weight and all of it's an incredible engineering feat. I spent a lot of time doing remote sensing of the ocean and modeling of the ocean, not to understand the ocean, unfortunately, it was because I was looking for other people's submarines.
Before we move on, I would also like to reference another gatekeeper I brought forward in the Lockheed project. And this is a Lockheed Martin VP who possibly aided Glenn Gaffney and maybe Robert Cardillo in blockage of UFO materials from Lockheed VP of Space Systems Jim Ryder to the OSAP program under the Kona Blue PSAP. If you have not, go watch that section or standalone video, as the Kona Blue saga is, in my opinion, one of the most critical paper trails of recovered non-human materials in existence. Allegedly, again, CIA DS&T Deputy Director Glenn Gaffney blocked such a transfer at the behest of the CIA. But I introduced Mary Kay Sturtevant as a possible co-conspirator. Sturtevant served as Lockheed VP of Government Affairs from 2006 to 2011, as well as Lockheed Martin Vice President of Intelligence, Joint and Science and Technology Programs, active in the year of the attempted transfer 2010/2011. Online, Sturtevant is largely a ghost, with extremely little available information on the internet. Fortunately, sparse mentions, a glowing celebration of her work by the NRO in Volume 3 of Leaders of the NRO, as well as old Senate Select Committee on Intelligence documents, allow us to fill insights into Sturtevant's startling history. Prior to government service, Sturtevant worked at the BDM, or Braddock Dunn and McDonald Corporation, where she, quote, conducted research and analysis on a wide range of defense and arms control issues, end quote. According to a White House statement on the appointment of Mary Sturtevant, the bright young professional also worked on technology transfer at BDM. If BDM is new to you, go watch the Lockheed video or Northrop Grumman project. Sturtevant began her career at the CIA in 1985 at the Directorate of Intelligence's Technology Transfer Assessment Center as an analyst focused on the role of Soviet intelligence in the acquisition of Western dual-use technology. Sturtevant would also work within the CIA Counterintelligence Center before being recruited to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, where she actually served for 8 years. At the SSCI, Sturtevant, quote, evaluated tactical military programs, provided advice on CIA programs, and served as budget director, responsible for all the staff support for the annual authorization of the intelligence budget, end quote. Sturtevant would then return to CIA as agency comptroller, support the Director of Central Intelligence Strategic Direction, and introduced information technology to office functions. In 2001, Sturtevant was appointed to Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Intelligence Programs, National Security Council, under George W. Bush, before being named the NRO's Deputy Director for National Support from 2004 to 2006. Believe it or not, Sturtevant's resume does not stop there, but her online footprint disappears majorly around the time she joined Lockheed Martin as Vice President of Intelligence, Joint and Science and Technology Programs. We can piece together documents and data to show she operated in this role at least from 2011 to 2015. 2011, of course, is the year of the thwarted Kona Blue technology transfer. I actually wager that Sturtevant likely had a conflict of interest in the transfer here, as her allegiances to the National Security Council, and more important in this case, the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, would likely have commanded her to aid in the blockage with Glenn Gaffney. Once agency, you are agency for life. Sadly, I requested assistance from Christopher Mellon to question Sturtevant as the two worked together closely on SSCI for years, and even shared identical per diems during various time periods. Yet, unfortunately, Mellon did not assist. Come on, Mr. Mellon. I'm sure this time, when you ask Sturtevant, she will remember, so go ahead and give it another try. So, in this section of NRO Gatekeepers, we have explored intriguing connections with the NRO, OUSDAT, aka USD-ANS, DDNI ATNF, CIA, DS&T, OGA, and MITRE. 13 such individuals have been identified, named, and explored within this project. Kaminsky, Deutsch, Perry, Lord, Wolf, Moynihan, Meyerix, Kirkpatrick, Faga, Kerr, Heinemann, Inman, and Sturtevant. All 13 of whom are highly likely, in my opinion, current or former legacy. I strongly implore the current U.S. administration to follow up on these leads. What's going on, everybody? It's Gerb, and as always, if you have made it this far into the video, I think this is probably at about 2 hours and 45 minutes, something like that. I must thank you endlessly from the bottom of my heart, and before we get into this end of video rant, a couple more thank yous. I need to thank each and every single person watching this video and so many people who I know have been with me from the start. During the course of this video, making this video, we hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. I am both humbled and honored that so many people have tuned in to listen to what I have to say and kind of observe my analyses of legacy programs and crash retrievals. It is truly a blessing. When I started this channel, what I had in mind for this channel actually was just sort of like a PowerPoint channel where I talked about sightings and, claims and surface level legacy program stuff. And I am truly honored and blessed to what this has blossomed into. Someday I can't wait to tell my story of the stuff I've kind of done behind the scenes, not in the channel, of meeting with witnesses, first-handers, connecting with them, the death threats I've received, Brad-S, the threats, the intimidation, all that stuff, the characters I've met, the stuff I've done. I'm truly humbled. This is why I always say at the end of each and every video, we're just getting started, and I truly mean that. We've hit a major channel milestone for kind of all channels. It's a huge number, but I just want everybody to know that the numbers, the views, that is not my end goal. Although I appreciate it and I'm blessed and humbled, my true goal is to uncover UFO legacy programs and meaningfully contribute to the mission that David Grusch started in 2023 and that he undertook long before he went public. So that is my goal, and I thank you all so much for supporting me. It truly means the world. Additionally, thank you to Xander Jones of the Dreamland Motel for the music once again.
Xander went above and beyond for this video to make some exclusive tracks for this video. You'll probably know when you listen back the exclusive track. He called it TR3B, so he knew I would love it. Check out his channel, The Dreamland Motel. By the time of dropping this video, he will have recently, within the past 2 weeks, uploaded a video on the 4chan whistleblower, who of course we mentioned briefly today. So please go check him out, show him some love. Not only is he a great friend of the channel, but he's a great friend in real life. I got to spend some time with him at the September hearings. I love him and the whole Night Shift crew. Great guys. So, and that includes Dan Cleary as well from the Others from Another Mother podcast clip I included here. Amazing people. So thank you, Xander. And again, guys, thank you so much. Now let me do my rant because I can't wait to do this. As the video is called today, this is an investigation into the NRO and UFO legacy programs. During the making of this video, 21st November to be exact, the Age of Disclosure was released. Now, on a live recently with Rob Jones and Kermit, two of my good friends, IRL, and two very smart guys, I highlighted some of my problems with the documentary. In fact, I went on a rant about the legacy program outline that was detailed by Luis Elizondo and Eric Davis. Not only was this a purposeful misdirection, but a complete egregious lie, in my opinion. And let me list that back and then see how that's a juxtaposition to today's video. So Luis Elizondo and Eric Davis and others, I'm sure in the making of the film, they state that there is one singular legacy program. I disagree with that vehemently. And that this program originates from the CIA DS&T, Directorate of Science and Technology. The deputy director, in fact, according to Eric Davis, has complete control over the UFO legacy program portfolio. Under the CIA DS&T, according to this outline, are three equal branches, that being the DOE with their creative classification controls, that being DIB primes, I disagree with that, and that being specifically the Air Force and Air Force SOF, Special Forces units, Tier 1 units, 24th STS, etc. units participating in crash retrievals. I think that is egregiously incorrect, and as I've spent the last 3 hours trying to prove that the NRO isn't just one other agency conveniently left out that is integral to UFO legacy programs. In fact, as I outlined at the beginning of my video, I think there are numerous siloed programs, each with their own avenues of oversight, each with their own sort of program administrator and so forth. So, gun to my head, what I kind of think is the overall outline of legacy programs today. Of course, I talked about there's a head of a pyramid. I think that's somebody, like the late Dick Cheney, that position kind of rotates. And that's the select few amount of people that kind of can dip their toes across legacy programs in these silos and kind of have access to numerous programs. Under that are legacy program administrators. That might be like a joint Air Force and NRO effort. That might be the CIA DS&T. That might be the Neuro. That might be the DARPA, etc. Under that are FFRDCs. Okay, that's critical to mention. As I said, of course, I think that GOCO institutions, government-owned, contractor-operated, are a critical piece for legacy programs with oversight. Because again, I don't think most legacy programs have a lack of oversight. I just think they have sort of stripped oversights, non-traditional oversight channels. Usually I don't do a cut here, but I'm sorry I had to take my dog out. But back to where I was, I don't think most legacy programs operate with a lack of oversight. I think they operate with non-traditional oversight channels, and that's something we kind of covered in the anonymous Reddit whistleblower, OGA whistleblower, and something I agree with. And these paramilitary teams, these Tier 1 assets that retrieve UFOs, it's not specifically JSOC command, it's its own umbrella siloed authority that utilizes Tier 1 units. That's something I agree with greatly. But in my outline of legacy programs, under the GOCO institutions are the defense industrial base primes, the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grummans, the Raytheons, and then contractors like SAIC. This is something that I agree with very strongly, that contractors aren't the end-all be-all, as people like Eric Davis and so forth would have you say. Even though, weirdly enough, Eric Davis also says that in 1989, all institutions, contractors were supposed to give back their materials to the U.S. government and elements of legacy programs because there was no headway on projects. But then in Age of Disclosure, people talk about how corporations primarily run these programs. I disagree with that. I think in 1989, there was sort of a loss of control over some legacy programs internally.
And that might have spiraled into some corporate programs that maybe operated with a lack of oversight, kind of rogue programs, specifically Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman specifically there. Yeah, but in my legacy program outline, the GOCOs, government-owned, contractor-operated, look back to J. Andrew Kistner, former Nevada State representative, who in his disclosures in 1994 to 1995 as a proto-David Grusch, kind of talked to numerous legacy first-handers, and kind of the crux of one of his arguments that in 1948, President Truman kind of established some legacy programs under various classified presidential executive orders, whether that be, presidential emergency action doctrines or documents, I don't know, but that in the early 1950s, custody of recovered materials were handed over to GOCOs, specifically national labs, government-owned, contractor-operated. I think such a system allows plausible deniability for legacy programs, but also retaining control over materials, documents, knowledge, etc., and being the arbiter of that information to defense industrial base primes on the lowest of the totem pole. I think that most people in defense industrial base primes that are engaged with legacy programs don't actually know what they're doing. I think specifically people like the corporate directors for special programs are those in the primes that know what they're doing. So I'm going on another rant here, and I'm sorry, guys. Let's kind of reorient and talk about NRO. And I want to talk about NRO, and I want to talk about the ties to the CIA, DS&T, etc. DS&T, Directorate of Science and Technology, I do think is a critical legacy program element, them and their OGA, but they're not the end-all, be-all. What's interesting to me are the connections between NRO, CIA, DS&T, the OGA, which spun out of DS&T, the MITRE Corporation, and then various departments within the SecDef and the ODNI. So this is an interesting thing to me, right? The Secretary of Defense or the Director of National Intelligence may not necessarily be briefed in to various legacy programs, but parts of their kind of directorates under them or parts of their own staff might be, which is very interesting. As we talked about today, I firmly believe the former OUSDAT, or current day Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, and their intelligence community counterparts, the DDNI, Deputy Director for National Intelligence, Acquisition, Technology, and Facilities, are engaged in such programs. In fact, on the DoD side, I also think the Undersecretary for Defense for Intelligence is engaged with such programs, which is why I think somebody like Christopher Mellon might know a little bit more than what they're saying, seeing as Christopher Mellon was the Deputy Assistant Undersecretary for Defense for Intelligence way back in the day. And that kind of brings me to some current figures. I know in this project I talked a lot about Immaculate Constellation, which is still so interesting, and those connections to NRO Sentient and Robert Cardillo talking about Sentient and Robert Cardillo being connected to the Kona Blue transfer. And I know I made the statement that I believe Luis Elizondo, I'm more on the side of authorized disclosures, made authorized disclosures of Immaculate Constellation and Tom DeLonge in the year of 2017, right when Luis Elizondo left federal service and, possibly still remained as a contractor for stuff like Space Force and, other institutions. But I made that thesis, and again, allegedly, I don't really want to get harassed or anything like that. I say that because I think it is overall helpful to the effort. Recently, Jeremy Corbell stated this, and I stated this even before that on my live with Rob and Kermit. I do believe Luis Elizondo has firsthand experience in UFO legacy programs, an extensive experience with National Security Council ran programs under the Obama administration, probably involving James Clapper, and some of the directives of these programs was a sort of limited disclosure initiative. I do not think that's harmful to say, and I do hope I don't get reprised for saying such things, but I do think that Luis Elizondo needs to kind of make apparent that ATIP wasn't a real program and that it was a cover program under the guise of NSC directives for limited transparency. And I think part of that was informing Tom DeLonge on the Immaculate Constellation program, specifically episodic visits, for a leftover idea that was Project Forum, which I've talked about before, which was detailed in the Bass-Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies 10-month report initiative that kind of got uncovered earlier this year, that talked about, influencing public figures out in California and to get people more interested in UFOs. So I personally believe that Luis Elizondo was tasked with a leftover idea by the National Security Council to do just that, and TTSA was a result of that, and that Tom DeLonge was exposed to elements of IMCON. Remember that Luis Elizondo was liaison to the NRO and other agencies during that time. So intriguing to me, and I do hope
we as folks interested in the subject and folks who want disclosure on the topic, not limited disclosure, not partial limited hangout disclosure, not partial disclosure, but for people to reveal what they've done in the programs and what they know, I think that is pertinent, and I think that is imperative. I hope everybody enjoyed the discussion of NRO retrieval teams, as well as the firsthand individual I outlined. I know I detailed his badge. I recreated that because the witness in question asked me not to feature his own handwriting, and of course I'm going to respect that. I didn't expand more on his testimony because, of course, now isn't really the time for that. He's not necessarily comfortable with me saying more than I did, and I totally respect that. I just thought that was, I thought it'd be really interesting for people to hear that, some of these embedded rapid reaction teams operate very similarly to some of the other stories in UFO lore that we've heard, specifically Jonathan Weygandt with the mission-oriented protective posture gear and Tier 1 elements, whether that be Delta, people in Army helmets are similar, operating as the ground force and utilizing the 160th SOAR or similar aviation units for MH or CH-47s to get retrievals done. I think that's very intriguing, and how the witness I talked about, specifically their ID badge and briefing documents, contained NRO inscriptions on them. So I think that NRO is deeply engaged in legacy programs, as well as the Immaculate Constellation program. And I know we just talked about IMCON and LU, and maybe we talk a little more about that because I highlighted it in the video, and I will say it again. IMCON is not a legacy program. In fact, part of my thesis on IMCON is that it originated out of the National Security Council, NSC, to utilize tasked and untasked assets from intelligence community to get a understanding of both UFOs, non-human, and ARV. And part of my quandary here, and what I wonder, is that the way legacy programs are siloed, perhaps the NSC, this was a retroactive reaction to try and find some other sort of capabilities of parallel siloed legacy programs that members of NSC or NSC-run programs weren't involved in. So whilst Immaculate Constellation isn't a legacy program, perhaps it had involvement from some legacy program personnel. Or possibly it was just created out of the NSC by those uninitiated to legacy programs, and a USAP was created. Again, it's just a thesis of mine, but I do think that it is likely IMCON originated from the NSC. So what else can we talk about, guys? We can talk about numerous gatekeepers, and of course, as we talked about, the OUSDAT and DDNI ATNF connection, and USDI, I think, is another connection to look for there. The directors of the NRO, we kind of looked at programs B specifically with R. Everett Hindman and Martin C. Faga, one of the directors of the NRO who actually declassified the NRO. If you look back to his page in one of the leaders of the NRO celebration pages, it's so funny. One of his quotes says, something similar to the best intelligence is intelligence gathered with ideas that physics don't conform to. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something similar to that. That to me feels very on the nose. I mean, something I demonstrated in this video, which, I stand by, I do think that the NRO utilizes tasked alien reproduction vehicles or derivative technologies for the expressed purpose of ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, to access denied airspace and perform ISR of adversaries. Now, I raised the question, and I still don't know to what the amount of legacy programs that I believe exist siloed from one another. I do think there are different technological achievements. ARV, I think some institutions like NRO still use for ISR purposes. I think there's other programs where these are still in RDT&E stages. I think back to the testimony of witness Ed out of the Edwards 412 test wing, who stated that, whilst an electronic warfare group detector out there at Edwards, he served as the strategic debriefer or intermediary for test pilots out of the AFFTC and the Edwards TPS test pilot school for, reverse engineered vehicles. So part of me wonders what programs have actual functioning ARV for ISR purposes, in my opinion, or are still in the RDT&E stages. So that's pretty intriguing to me. Another huge shout out to Chris Sharp for his excellent article on the CIA OGA and retrieval teams. And I of course discussed how I think Chris is missing some critical elements there, such as combat support agencies like the NGA, overall insane agencies like the NRO, the 160th SOAR, and other logistics, but I see why he was getting a targeted point specifically with the CIA. And I can't stress this enough, guys. I think with the age of disclosure and other avenues that specifically the Air Force, Department of Energy, which of course makes sense, but don't forget about their semi-autonomous subordinate agency, the NNSA, DIB primes, and the CIA DS&T, they're the ones they're the ones who have been thrown the live hand grenade right now. They're the ones who are expected to get the hot potato. I hope that viewers of my channel understand that this is not the end-all be-all of the programs. The Deputy Director of CIA DS&T, Glenn Gaffney, Doug Wolf, etc. These are not the people who are in charge of the entire UFO legacy program portfolio, and there's not just one legacy program. I can't stress that enough, that it is one of the truest statements I could possibly make to how I think legacy programs operate. There is not just one. And I think that we've seen that the NRO, at least tried to discuss, has a very deep hand in such things. I hope everybody also, I know it's becoming a reoccurring thing, but everybody enjoyed the discussion of the Wilson Davis notes. Again, I seemingly have problems with Eric Davis, how he talked about me on either LinkedIn or Facebook, but I still fully, fundamentally believe the facts of the Wilson Davis notes are true, and that being that Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson and former DIA Deputy Director was stonewalled in accessing UFO legacy programs. I have introduced various competing theories to what that audit was that almost unveiled the program. I love this new entry of between 1992 and 1995, the SSCI and the GAO kind of investigating the NRO's financials, because the NRO was declassified in 92. And not only was the NRO kind of caught in a huge scandal for a giant headquarters for, 300-400% rise in cost, but also the billions and billions and billions of dollars in carryover funds. Carryover funds is a method of misappropriation of funds. As we talked about today, leftover funds unspent in a fiscal year being carried over to the same project or different projects in the next fiscal year. The NRO got busted for billions and billions of that. So in my opinion, that's a very valid entry for such a possible audit that unveiled some of the programs. Seen as I do think many high-level UFO legacy program gatekeepers or personnel have direct ties to NRO, whether that be Kaminsky, whether that be Meyerix, whether that be Doug Wolf, etc. I think that's a very important key thing. But I'm rambling here, guys. This video is going to be over 3 hours anyway. So with that, I'll give my closing remarks. I'd like to thank everybody again so much. 100,000 subscribers. It's unbelievable. I'm humbled and honored. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. That's a huge help. And again, as always, I have a Patreon for the channel. I would be honored and blessed for you to support the Patreon. I don't gatekeep content. I don't have time nor the want to. So only support what you think the channel is worth. And any support is so greatly appreciated. Even if you just like the video, comment, and subscribe, that is already fantastic support. And with that being said, guys, so many interesting projects in the works, stuff I want to do, hopefully first-handers to come on camera and talk, and other folks. So with that, I'll let everybody go. And thank you so much for being here and watching the project. I will catch everybody next time. Thank you so very much. Bye.